Well, what about it, mister? What is this Fallout stuff?
The Fallout franchise is almost 30 years old, and it's been through a lot over those years. First owned by Interplay Entertainment, and now Bethesda Studios, it's gone from a series that looks like this, to looking like this. As a result, the games almost feel like they represent two different eras, old and new, modern and classic. So you can bet we're getting the classic Fallout Iceberg. I'll be going off of this design by Educational Wave 786, and then wrapping up with some custom entries of my own, including ones you guys suggested. This video will be for everyone who either loves the older games from Interplay, or wants to try getting into them. I hope you guys enjoy. This is the complete Classic Fallout Iceberg series, and let's get right into it. In Fallout 1, it's actually possible to fail the main quest line in two different ways, getting a bad ending cutscene as a result. During the first stage of the main quest, the player, also known in the first game as the Vault Dweller, is tasked with finding a water chip for their home, Vault 13. The Vault's water purification system relies on a control chip to make drinking water, and the only one they had is now broken. So, the Vault Dweller gets sent on a mission to find a replacement chip out in the wasteland. Except, there's a catch. Unlike other RPGs, where you kinda have time to dilly-dally in the face of an apocalyptic crisis, Vault 13's crisis is the real deal. You only have 150 days to find a new water chip. If you take too long, you'll get 2 warnings that your people's water reserves are running low. Hit 150 days, and... Everyone the Vault Dweller knows and loves dying of dehydration is a bad enough ending, but it's not the only way to fail the game. During the second half of the main quest, it becomes your goal to wipe out the Master and his army of super mutants. They serve as a major threat against mankind and your Vault, looking to convert humanity into mutants and bring about an enforced unity. And while there is a good ending where the Vault Dweller defeats the Master, there exists an ending where they don't. By talking to either the Lieutenant or the Master, one can choose to betray their Vault, reveal its location, and join the mutant cause. This results in a cutscene considered one of the darkest bad endings in gaming history. I'll let you judge for yourself. Special encounters are a unique type of random encounter that occur while traveling across the world map. Rather than exploring one big open world, the original Fallout games abstracted world travel and made it a matter of moving across a map between different destinations. But even this was still interesting, owing to the chance of random encounters and the memorable special encounters. They could involve anything, from finding a unique NPC to talk with, to stumbling upon the TARDIS from Doctor Who, a UFO with a working alien blaster, and a picture of Elvis, and much more. They were fun Easter eggs to find, and ironically enough, given their name, something that made the first games feel special. Special weapons are a small number of unique weapons that can be found in either special encounters or by doing quests. These include the likes of the 9mm Mauser you can loot off Gizmo, and the alien blaster. In the original Fallout games, you could, let's say, prevent a teenage wasteland. Yeah, there's no dressing this up. You could kill kids. It definitely wasn't encouraged, as there was a reputation you could get for it in which NPCs suddenly hate the player. And it is worth mentioning that digital releases of Fallout 1 sold today don't have children in them. They're completely removed from the game, just like what happened with the UK release. Fun fact about that: Europe wouldn't even sell Fallout if there were kids in it.
They wouldn't even sell the game if there were children in the game. We didn't have time to read all the quests. What we just did is we just deleted kids off the disc.
While the UK version was censored, the original US version wasn't. However, now all the digital versions sold today are censored. So basically, I think in order to play it safe with international audiences, Bethesda went with something like that UK cut of the game with the Steam and GOG versions. Except it's kinda weird, because Fallout 2 has children who die in story moments and that you can kill yourself, so why is only the first game censored? I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, you could just install a patch or mod to add all the censored stuff back in if you want. Including... Chris Avellone is a game designer and writer who has worked on the likes of Fallout 2, Interplay's Fallout 3, and New Vegas. His name makes some appearances in the games themselves, as a mercenary in Fallout 1 and a mayor in Fallout Tactics. He was also responsible for compiling the Fallout Bible, which contains tons of info and lore surrounding classic Fallout. Avellone has one hell of a resume under his belt, and is considered one of the greatest writers in gaming history. I'd recommend watching his game conference talks, as well as checking out his blog, Fallout...
Apocrypha.
It gives some interesting insights, including why horses might be extinct in the Fallout universe, and how Dogmeat is the continually reincarnating eternal champion of dog kind. Check it out. The classic Fallouts had an isometric perspective, and even when talking to NPCs in dialogue mode, that doesn't change. Unless you talk to one of the game's special NPCs, where rather than talking to a sprite, you would get...
Greetings. Your business in Shady Sands might be...
This is what the Interplay devs called talking heads, clay models that were sculpted, then digitized and animated. The process to make only one head was about 8 weeks, so plans to make 50 of them were understandably scrapped. The heads we do get have been called poorly aged or uncanny, but for me, there is a charm to them, the same way retro graphics can have a charm to many. The imperfection of the heads makes them memorable. And in Fallout's case, I'd argue that imperfection actually makes more sense here than in other older games. Here, we're not supposed to be looking at perfect, clean humans. We're looking at the rugged survivors of a wasteland. So the abstraction definitely helps remind us of this dark reality. Combined with their A-list voice talents, as well as how expressive they can be, the talking heads just work. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel killed Interplay Entertainment? So, the answer for this one is ultimately no. Interplay was never killed. It still exists, only as a shell of its former self, capitalizing on its remaining IPs. Rather than a tragic death, think a tragic fall from grace. As for Fallout Brotherhood of Steel causing it, Brotherhood of Steel, or BOS, or POS as some call it, was definitely the last game Interplay released before the company was brought into bankruptcy court and forced to sell the Fallout IP in 2007. And with how the game was designed, it was clearly made hoping to appeal to a wider market, with the likes of Slipknot music, more sexualized characters, and a focus around action. Ultimately though, BOS failed to sell well enough to rescue Interplay, but it's not solely to blame. Interplay was already suffering lower sales, poor team morale, and apparently making bad financial decisions, so its fall was basically guaranteed, no matter how good any Hail Mary game could have been. I will say though, it is funny to picture BOS being the killing blow, especially considering how universally hated it is amongst Fallout fans. The game is just not respected at all, and rather deservedly, it's seen as a final nail in the coffin than a true Fallout title. Reused assets are prevalent in Fallout 2 and New Vegas. In Fallout 2's case, there's a lot of textures and character models from the first game that appear again in the sequel. Even the player character gets the same exact Vault 13 jumpsuit model from Fallout 1, with no wear or tear to speak of. There is a narrative reason for getting the suit, but one could argue it's just a creative way of reusing old assets instead of making new ones. It's also a sign of Fallout 2's insanely short development time of basically 9 months. The devs just didn't have time to make a game completely filled with new assets, so asset reuse was basically a necessity. Then there was Fallout New Vegas, whose development studio Obsidian Entertainment only had 18 months of dev time to finish it, on a 3D engine the company hadn't used before. It's not really shocking that, to ease development, New Vegas ended up using assets from Fallout 3. So at the end of the day, while it won't win the games any points for originality, it does make sense why the asset reuse is there. Floaters are one of the hideous creations of FEV, and served in the Master's army as a sort of war animal. They have an inflation sac under their mouths that allows them to float, hence the name Floater, and they're a decent threat against the player. But there is a lot more to them beyond being a late game enemy. For starters, the actual origin of the Floaters remains a mystery. While the super mutants derive from FEV experimentation on humans, and the centaurs are a weird combo between a human, a dog, and a cat, the Floaters are a bit harder to pinpoint. There's a theory that the Floaters are the result of mutated flatworms, due to the worms being mentioned in records pertaining to FEV research, but there's no definitive connection between the two outside of appearances, and it's never been confirmed. Another fun fact around Floaters is how they were made. Their creator is Jason D. Anderson, a former Interplay designer and artist who says he used a pornographic image to design their mouths. He called them sphincter monsters, and suddenly things check out. The Floaters recently made an appearance in Fallout 76 as a variant species in Appalachia, West Virginia. However, they do look a lot different than their California counterparts. Maybe one day, we'll get a new Fallout game where we get to see the original porn-inspired design in full 3D glory. The Chosen One is the name of the player character in Fallout 2, and them being the strongest in the game, never mind the series, is a solid claim. Keep in mind that Frank Horrigan, who is the strongest, deadliest enemy in the classic games, serves as Fallout 2's final encounter, and the Chosen One destroys him. Frank Horrigan, who punches a Deathclaw's head off, is reduced to this. No matter your personal ranking of the Fallout protagonists, needless to say, you don't want to mess with the Chosen One. TKS Mantis is a Fallout YouTuber known for his useless fact series and coverage of the original games, including the one that kickstarted his love for the franchise, Fallout 2. I'd recommend giving his content a watch, as he has some good videos on the classic games and gives advice to newcomers looking to get into them. So check him out. The idea of the classic Fallout games being remastered comes up time and time again, but nothing official has been confirmed, and Bethesda as a studio is on record as prioritizing original releases compared to endless remasters. Unless the game Skyrim. And unless your owner is now Microsoft. So, I don't know, maybe a remaster might be on the table sometime in the future for another anniversary. I would say it's very unlikely, just sales and audience-wise. Also, while Bethesda does have the source code of the original games, it would take work to update code made for this. All that effort and resources spent for a non-mainstream game. I just don't see it happening. But say if the stars ever aligned and they got the right consultants to help with the project, I think it could be awesome. I would really like to see a remake or remaster that fixes remaining bugs and spelling issues. Plus, Tim has this fantastic video on his channel detailing what he'd want to do with a remake if given the opportunity. Things like adding more reactivity, upping the quality of the assets which was sacrificed by early 3D technology. Just taking the game up to 11. That's the remake I'd want to play. And even if it doesn't happen, one can dream.
Spare change, old friend, old pal? Can you help a poor mutant down on his luck?
Harold is a fan-favorite character in the series, known for his good nature and storytelling. He's also interesting in that while he's similar to ghouls in the franchise, being practically immortal, he isn't quite one of them. See, Harold was mutated because of exposure to the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, not radiation exposure like how the other ghouls were mutated. He does have a ghoul-like appearance, but unique to him, an unusual growth is forming on his head. It's a tree. Harold calls it Bob. Then Bob makes Harold become a tree. It's actually a pretty sad fate, and it oddly mirrors one of Harold's former companions, Richard Gray, who was mutated right alongside Harold. Only Gray became the Master, a horrific hive mind of amalgamated flesh that used his newfound mutation to forcibly mutate Wastelanders. He became worshipped by the children of the Cathedral, and used them as spies and healers to subvert mankind until his death. Meanwhile, centuries after the Master's passing, Harold becomes fully transformed because of Bob, and just really hates it. In fact, when a group of people start worshipping him, calling themselves the Tree Minders, he doesn't like that much either. All this guy wants to do is die, and yet there's this faction feuding over him, deciding whether they should accelerate his growth to plant trees throughout the wasteland, or whether it's safer to only have him serve as a small oasis. This is a development that occurs during Fallout 3, so it's not classic Fallout. However, it is a classic feeling quest with a lot of choices of a morally ambiguous nature. The same stuff the original game shot for according to its vision document. And no matter what choice is made, it caps off a story 3 games in the making. All around a fan favorite character from the originals. The New California Republic, or NCR, was founded at the end of Fallout 1. In that game, there's a small village called Shady Sands, which is struggling to really defend itself from mutant and raider attacks. Aradesh is the leader, and his daughter Tandy gets kidnapped by the Khan's group of raiders halfway through the game. Assuming you save Tandy and that both of these characters are alive by the end of the playthrough, it's revealed that big things are in store for Shady Sands.
In Shady Sands, Tandy helps her father Aradesh bring a new community and new life out of the broken remains of the world. They are responsible for the new California Republic, whose ideals spread across the land.
Out of Shady Sands came the NCR, a post-war government emulating old world values of democracy and freedom. It's appeared multiple times throughout the series as a major faction in the Wasteland, and it's also become increasingly corrupted with each installment. In Fallout 2, conspiring against a nearby settlement called Vault City so that they assimilate with the NCR, and then turning into an expansionistic empire by New Vegas, dressing up conquest as democratization. The NCR's current status is unknown after Season 1 of the Fallout show, with its first capital, Shady Sands, now being a crater after a nuclear attack. But while we might not know what the NCR will become, we'll always know how it started. Bethesda saved Fallout. Yeah, this one's gonna tick people off. The fact is, Bethesda did acquire the Fallout IP from a failing Interplay, and turned what was once a well-received computer RPG series into a household name. The Fallout franchise isn't at any risk of dying, and that is because of Bethesda. Their games are heavily marketed and know how to reel in large audiences by simplifying systems and catering to the masses. Fallout isn't a niche turn-based RPG anymore. It's a mainstream success. It'll live on forever now, but it will live at a cost. There's always a price with the kind of mass appeal you see in big franchises like this. For example, a lot of the darkness inherent to Fallout's post-apocalyptic hellscape got toned down in favor of pulpy, wacky wasteland fun. Even the original intent of the series, to explore the ethics of a post-nuclear wasteland, isn't nearly as solidly delivered now as it should be. It's the game that sold the world, quite literally. Now, to play devil's advocate, it's better to have something to complain about than nothing at all. The franchise is alive, and we did get Fallout New Vegas out of the deal, which is often considered to be the best in the whole franchise. Imagine if Bethesda didn't acquire the series. Would we have gotten another Fallout game at all, let alone New Vegas? So many modders and artists have been drawn in because of that game alone. Not to mention, a lot of gamers now know the older games and show their respect to them because of the new ones. Because of Bethesda. So, perhaps some sympathy for the devil is in order here. Okay, actually, scratch that, never mind. Fallout Sonora and Nevada are total conversion mods for Fallout 2. They were created by a small team of modders called Nevada Band Studio, led by a Siberian designer named Alexander, aka Black Designer. I won't get too into these mods because they're gonna get their own video one day, but to keep it short, these aren't just mods. These are entire new Fallout games, and just about the closest attempts at capturing the spirit of the originals there's been besides Fallout 1.5. They were made by fans for fans, designed around the original principles of the classic Fallouts, from multiple choices and quests to moral dilemmas in a dark wasteland setting. While I haven't finished these games yet, I am impressed by what I've played so far, and I'd recommend them to anyone looking for more old school Fallout or solid RPGs. I also wanted to give a shout out to one of the designers on Fallout Sonora, Alexander Berzin, or Red 888 Guns, an artist who's been making I'm not even lying here, some of the best fan art for the classic games. It's been featured already in this video, and it's awesome. In fact, Alexander is working right now with New Blood Interactive on a Fallout-inspired project of theirs, set in a retro-futuristic pre-war setting. Really looking forward to that, along with Black Designer's future RPG project now that he's done with Sonora's development. This guy's going commercial, and I'd love to support him with my money. So keep an eye out for sure, because this guy delivers the goods. Gore is practically a trademark of the Fallout franchise. It's featured in the marketing, and no surprise, it wound up in the Fallout TV show. Even the vision document, detailing the pillars of the first game's design, made its first point specifically about Fallout's mega-violence. When people die, they don't just die. They get cut in half, they melt into a pile of goo, explode like a blood sausage, or several different ways, depending on the weapon you use. When I use my rocket launcher on some poor, defenseless townsperson, he'll know, and his neighbors will be cleaning up the blood for weeks. This is the wasteland. Life is cheap, and violence is all that there is. Again, gore is a staple of the series at this point, but there is reason to place it in the classic Fallout list. That's because the new gore is a whole different beast compared to the old stuff. And I know how that sounds, so hear me out. The new games are 3D and have a lot more glorious, gory detail. Eyes and limbs go flying. Heck, you can even carry them around like the inhumane savage you are. But at the end of the day, it's kinda just cool. There's no weight to exploding people or blasting bodies apart. At most, it's like your bullets are making surgical slices or popping a balloon. Meanwhile, gore in the original games, despite the limited death animations, is memorable in a twisted way. You're not just exploding people, you're splintering them. You rend them apart. It's crunchy and horrific, and a hell of a reason why the older Fallout games are considered dark games. Cut from Fallout 1, the Vipers were planned to be a joinable raider group, much like the Khans. They even share a similar origin, also being inhabitants of Vault 15 who fled into the wasteland and were changed by it for the worst. Except, whereas the Khans are your typical thieving, killing raiders, the Vipers were a zealous cult of snake worshippers. Driven mad by the venom of mutant vipers, this crazy faction lived next to a pit of the creatures, worshipping them as gods and sacrificing travelers to them. This would have also included the player. If they managed to somehow survive the pit, they would be offered the chance of becoming an honorary member of the Vipers by performing one more task for them. You'd think slaying their gods would be enough, but I guess they have high standards. There's a ton of lore that was written for these guys, including monthly coma rituals and how they were founded, but none of it is in Fallout 1. Then the Vipers got to appear in New Vegas, but as this shell of their former self. They're just generic raider bad guys who use guns. Nothing about them wearing bone armor or being proficient in stealth, using paralytics to stun their enemies and gather them as sacrifices. I guess there is a lore reason for their current state, but it's still sad we never got a taste of the classic Vipers. The games is too difficult. This is a reference to criticism often leveled towards the older games that they're way too hard. Attacks miss too much. Rats can kill you in the first 5 minutes. Ants can kill you in the first 5 minutes. The game is hard and therefore bad, hence negative Steam review. In all seriousness though, the games do have a bit of a learning curve, especially for audiences used to the newer titles. I was even surprised that I got into the older games like I did, but it probably comes down to the fact that growing up, I played a bunch of puzzle games like I Spy. I was used to randomly clicking around a screen to progress. I lucked out. Plenty of people haven't, and it's gonna be harder going from an action-based FPS to a slower, zoomed-out RPG. Make no mistake, the original games are not Bethesda Fallout. The original games are classic Fallout, and it will beat you to your knees if you let it. There are good resources for playing these games, and probably many more that I'm not listing right now, but I wanted to throw my own hat in the ring to help people out. The games are a bit difficult, so here's what you can do. Number 1, understand that you can make a bad build. Some skills are much better than others, to the point of absurdity, and there's no respec options. So, fear your creation. Make it something you know you can rely on. Number 2. Speed things up. You don't have to walk everywhere you go. You can double click to run. Heck, you can actually go to the settings and turn on always run if you want. But just keep in mind, you can't sneak and move with this setting on. Also, make sure you crank the combat speed up so animations are faster. Trust me on this, you're not missing much. You don't want to play Classic Fallout like... Number 3. You're an underdog. Once you leave the vault, you see Ed. Ed is dead. Why is this? Because Ed's like you. He wasn't the chosen one, and neither are you. You may think you were chosen to save the vault just because you're special. You're not. You just picked the short straw. Also, the wasteland's a dangerous place, and Ed was probably killed by rats. Don't think you're lesser for running around rats. Pride cometh before the fall. You are an underdog, and you're gonna be fighting for your survival. Save your ammo, and pick your battles wisely. Then comes Fallout 2, which actually does make you the chosen one. But not in the divine sense. More like the Nepo baby sense. And this game's even harder than the first one. They were not joking around here, especially with the random encounters. It can mess a whole party of companions up. So my suggestion is, don't rush. Do the quests in town, level yourself up, get yourself and your companions good gear, and don't forget to raise the outdoorsman skill. It's useless in Fallout 1, but useful in Fallout 2 for skipping encounters. Save sometimes during your travels, just to avoid getting randomly screwed. Basically, even though you are the hero, you're an underdog, and you ought to make survival a pretty big priority. Number 4. Use your head. It's best to almost picture the original games like a hybrid between an RPG and an adventure game. You're solving a mystery in the main quest. You're exploring settlements and gathering clues to complete objectives. You're navigating a UI from the 1990s. Slow down. This isn't an action FPS. Use your head. And that's all I'm gonna offer. But it should be enough to know that while the games are hard, they're not impossible. If 90s kids could play them, so can you. Vault Boy and Pip Boy are different characters, or at least they originally were. Vault Boy is the mascot of Vault-Tec, and also appears in the wearable computer called Pip Boy, as seen in various perks and UI elements. Pip Boys were standard equipment in vaults, and this connection has led Vault Boy to be called Pip Boy sometimes. However, this isn't supposed to be correct. See, Robco were the creators of Pip Boy, and gave it an original mascot that isn't Vault Boy and wasn't designed by Vault-Tec. It's lesser known about because it only appeared briefly in the classic games on the Pip Boy 2000 series, until much recently with Fallout 76 and the Fallout show. It also probably didn't help that the poor dude was blocked by the countdown timer in Fallout 1 for half the game. See, right there. That is Pip Boy. And yet, a lot of people don't know about him. They just use Vault Boy and Pip Boy interchangeably. Even when you specifically look up Pip Boy mascot, you'll get Vault Boy pop up as your first result, because they're just so well associated now. And to make matters worse, Bethesda put the final nail in the coffin by renaming Pip Boy into Vault Boy 2000 in Fallout 76. So, while I really wish I could say this entry helps clear the confusion surrounding a tiny piece of classic Fallout lore, Bethesda retconned that chance away. Vault Boy and Pip Boy were once meant to be two different characters, but now they're officially merged as one. Fallout Tactics launched with multiplayer and a number of game modes, including Capture the Flag, Skirmish Mode, a scavenger hunt mode where players had to collect more items than the rival team to win, and a mode called Assault where teams try to destroy each other's bases. You won't be able to play Tactics multiplayer through normal means, since the servers have been shut down, but YouTuber Triangle City does have a video on how to set it up, which is playing in the background right now. Give it a watch if you've ever thought what Classic Fallout needed was a deathmatch mode. Fallout, a post-nuclear role-playing game, is the full title for the first Fallout game, but that almost wasn't the case. Fallout did go through a lot of name ideas, including After the Bomb and Hiroshima Revisited. However, the name that seems to have gotten the most traction before Fallout, the one we see the most early artwork for, is Vault 13. I think the implication of this entry is that, in another timeline, the first game in the series would have been called Vault 13, a post-nuclear role-playing game. That still works, honestly, but as Tim Kaines pointed out, it had been hard to make sequels for, and Fallout just hits a lot harder. Gecko in a Can was promotional merchandise made for Fallout 2, and according to what I found off the No Mutants Allowed forum, was handed out at the Fallout 2 release party as part of the gift bags people got. It's a can with a plush gecko inside. Pretty cute, and a lot nicer than the geckos we do get throughout the series. The Cut Submarine is a cut location from Fallout 2, also known as the Shi. It belonged to the Shi, the descendants of a pre-war Chinese submarine crew who made a home for themselves in the post-war ruins of San Francisco. Originally, the player would need to deactivate its automated defense system in order to drive a tanker past it and reach the Enclave's oil rig. It was meant to be yet another step in the main quest, and would have just padded the game's runtime. So it does make sense why it got cut. Death messages were featured in the original Fallouts, where upon dying, you'd get to hear Ron Perlman tell you about it.
The darkness of the afterlife is all that awaits you now. May you find more peace in that world than you found in this one.
Each message had a percentage chance of happening, and this was taken further into Fallout 2. Whereas most of the messages are really grim, Fallout 2 includes a number of messages that are basically just silly jokes, having a 1% chance of happening. Take a listen.
You're dead. Again. Boy, are you stupid. And dead. Time to reload. Hope you saved your game. 'Cause you're dead. Here's a picture of your corpse. Not pretty.
Valerie, also known as Vic's daughter, is a character who appears in Fallout 2, and is part of a unique encounter that can occur if you have Vic in your party. Take him to Vault City, enter the maintenance center, and suddenly, there's this kind of cutscene that happens where the two characters are talking to each other, and so is the player character. I'm not the biggest fan of this, even though I really like the idea of the encounter. More stuff like this could be really cool, bringing a companion along and running into a character that they happen to know, triggering dialogue or combat, and we kind of get a prototype for that here. It's just the execution is really weird. The game suddenly pauses for this moment where you have no input over what you say. In an RPG where that's kind of the point. It could have been something that happens in the dialogue window, where maybe we get to interject and roleplay, but instead, the roleplaying is done for us. It's unusual, and Vic's daughter causes it. The NCR hires raiders. Kind of. More like hiring people to hire raiders to do dirty work for the NCR. See? Much better. In Fallout 2, the NCR is expanding their empire. They've got sights set on Vault City. It's a technologically advanced and democratic community, so it'd be perfect territory for the NCR. But Vault City is highly isolationist, which poses some problems. Rather than outright conquering the city, the NCR opts for more cunning means to make the city their own. For one, they have an NCR undercover agent named Thomas More, who passes Vault City's citizenship test and works to weaken their border policies. That would be bad enough, until you learn that the same spy is responsible for cutting a deal with Mr. Bishop, head of the Bishop crime family in New Reno. In exchange for the promise of power in a NCR-controlled New Reno, Bishop hires Wastelanders to stage attacks against the Vault City community. This leaves Vault City afraid of raids and attacks, even potentially weakened with the death of innocent security forces, causing a problem which a stronger, more militarized faction like the NCR can offer the help with. Basically, the NCR sells a solution to a problem they caused. It's a dark piece of lore that I'm surprised more people aren't familiar with. Most people turn to New Vegas as proof of the NCR's corruption, but pay close attention, and you can see the seeds as early as Fallout 2. An intelligent spore plant named Seymour lives in Broken Hills, the result of the local professor's science experiments. As a young sapling, it learned early on to play dumb so that it didn't fall victim to scientific examination. Seymour asks the player to scoop him up with a shovel and move him closer to the local ghouls, so he has someone to talk to, in exchange for chess lessons for you to beat the professor's intelligent rad scorpion. Yeah, Fallout 2 was an interesting game. The whole encounter is a reference to Little Shop of Horrors, which had a main character named Seymour taking care of the alien plant Audrey 2, although it eventually became a threat against mankind. So, who knows? Maybe helping shovel up Seymour was actually a big mistake. Cassidy's cut talking head is a reference to a mistake made by the Fallout fandom. Namely, the belief that Fallout 2's John Cassidy had a talking head cut out of the original game, when he never did. This talking head you see right here is actually part of a mod called Mutant Rising that's been in development since 2003. The head was reused in the Fallout 2 Restoration Project mod, which was designed to bring back content that was cut out of Fallout 2. This led Nukipedia, a Fallout fan wiki website, to mistakenly believe that Cassidy's head was actual cut content made by Interplay that was now being restored. It wouldn't be such a big deal, except the official Fallout board game ended up releasing their design of John Cassidy, which looks a lot like the modded talking head. The board game expansion with Cassidy came out in 2018, and according to the Wayback Machine, we can see that the Nukipedia mistake still hadn't been fixed by the end of 2019. This mistake in confusing what's official and what's fan-made content may have well caused a mod to become official lore. The classic Fallout games had a ton of quests that got cut out or never worked on due to time constraints, and we're gonna go over them. All of them. All the ones I could find. Let's do this. Starting with Fallout 1. Originally, you'd been able to become a member of the Blades Gang, following an order from their leader Razor to kill someone. Assumedly, this either would have been one of the regulators who killed her boyfriend, or a gang member from the Rippers, their rival. Completing this quest would have unlocked another, where you could help Blades member Romero deliver a locket and message to his love Juliana, who lived in Aditum. You could have helped the star-crossed lovers out, or make their love story a tragedy. Speaking of tragic love stories, Razor lost her love Jason Zimmerman, the son of Aditum's mayor, to the regulators, who control the town and pinned his murder on the Blades Gang. But originally, Jason would have been alive, captured by the Rippers and in need of rescue. You could deliver a mysterious package from the Gunrunners to the followers of the Apocalypse, which turned out to be a bomb. You could report Iguana Bob to Hub Police instead of just blackmailing him about the true source of iguana bits. You could save a Junktown waitress named Trish who got attacked by the Skulls Gang, save Aditum's residents from being attacked by gangs, and these things are getting their own entry, quests included. I've been saving the best for last though. Of all Fallout 1's cut quests, the next ones did stand out the most to me, but also sting the most. For Fallout 1, there was the cut Viper's Initiation questline, which I mentioned earlier in the video but didn't really get into. There'd have been multiple ways of getting initiated. If you want to roleplay a devious raider, loot a caravan or a settlement for supplies. Or, for a less evil choice, you can help the Vipers reclaim territory from other raiders. It's a lot more nuanced than the Khan's initiation of, just shoot these girls, prove you're bad to the bone, and I really would have liked to have seen it. I also would have wanted the Children of the Cathedral spy quests. The Followers of the Apocalypse are a benevolent faction that preserve old world information and serve to educate the Wasteland. They're humanitarians, and the Master's Children of the Cathedral want them eliminated, so they put a spy in their base. This would have led to a mystery-styled quest of finding the spy and stopping them before it was too late. And there was going to be another one tied to the Brotherhood of Steel. Keep in mind that the Followers are much more lax compared to the reclusive Brotherhood. So some harder decisions might have been on the table for the latter quest. Maybe during your investigation, you're gonna have to play it cool unless word gets around you're playing detective and they kick you out. Or worse. Maybe it's easier planting evidence on the culprit than convincing the mob they've been manipulated. Is bringing justice by the books the way to go? Or do you need a faster solution in the face of evil? In Klamath, you would have been able to expose the Duttons as cattle rustlers. Also, there would have been quests tied to the cut locations. The Abbey, a monastery of pacifist monks preserving pre-war books and manuscripts, would have allowed you to look at their library, and would have provided solutions to various quests in the game. Later, the Abbey would have been invaded by the Brotherhood of Steel, and have its books confiscated, leaving you to have to deal with the situation. It could have set up an interesting moral quandary. Do you leave all this information in the hands of a defenseless people who are probably just going to have this happen to them again? Or do you entrust it to the Brotherhood? Moreover, it could have been pretty interesting to see why exactly the Brotherhood took the manuscripts. Maybe they're just hoarding more information for themselves, or they could be fighting against the Enclave. Maybe what the Brotherhood is doing is wrong, but it's a case of the ends justifying the means. There would have been the Environmental Protection Agency and a she quest tied to it, presumably to prevent them from getting overrun by mutant plants. Or maybe that would cause it. Another she quest involved getting a body back that the Hubologist stole. You would have been able to actually rescue the sister of the tribal companion Solek from slavers, as well as helping Vault City enslave a whole village if you wanted. Sergeant Stark would have asked you to eliminate the guardian mole rats of a small nearby community, so its people would be defenseless. You could do this, or you could supply the community with guns or full power over the moles. You would have been able to bring about an orphanage for the kids of the den, which would have meant no more pickpockets. This really would have been a great inclusion. Just like the original idea to have multiple ways of reaching the oil rig in the main quest, including the use of a vertibird. It's not a full quest that got cut, but shaving this off the main quest line definitely made it feel a bit more linear. All in all, there are quests that make sense why they got cut, but I do wish we'd have gotten some of them. Speaking of cut content, we have entire cut Fallout games to talk about. With the amount of information available about them, this could be a whole video in of itself. But we're just going to be covering the basics of each game. The most infamous one being Interplay's Fallout 3, aka Van Buren. A ton of design documents surrounding this game have been released, and Fallout fans have rightfully mourned its loss. It would have been a proper continuation of the isometric games, except in 3D and with a movable camera. The player would have been an escaped prisoner, guilty or not, and would have explored the western US in the midst of a war between the NCR and Brotherhood of Steel. On top of being able to influence who wins the war, they'd have a rival party of characters to contend with who made choices in locations independently of the player if they were too late to go to them. This could have been a great RPG, with plenty of role-playing opportunities and reactivity. But the good news is, there's multiple fan projects in the works aiming to recreate the experience, so we'll probably end up seeing Van Buren in some form or another. The same can't be said about the likes of Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2. Unlike Van Buren, I'm not quite sure people would have died to have this game. But after going through its design documents, it did sort of seem they wanted to make a better game. There would have been a reputation system which determines the quests and reactions players get, as well as a working stealth system. Maybe it would have been an improvement over BOS. Emphasis on maybe. Then there was Fallout Tactics 2, which would have focused around the threat of an irradiated Gek spreading a mutant garden throughout the wasteland. I know Tactics doesn't have the best reputation, being a combat-focused spin-off game, but hearing designer Gareth Davies talk about the sequel makes me a bit sad. Quote, "I'm also pretty disappointed that Tactics 2 never saw the light of day, since it's a title that would have benefited from the experience and criticisms of the first game. Plus, we were very conscious of heeding Fallout canon as best we could, and providing more interesting tactical missions rather than the run-and-gun focus of the first game. Alternatively, we could have gotten Fallout Extreme, a cooperative strategy game focusing on a group of rebels called the Cause. They would have first fought against the Brotherhood of Steel for killing mutants and forcing humans into military service, before facing off against China itself. Sounds goofy to me, but who knows how it would have turned out. Finally, there was Fallout Online, a planned Fallout MMO that didn't see the light of day. Chris Taylor and Marco Green, two designers on the original game, were designing this one. Even Jason Anderson was on the project for a few years, so it seems that some of the old Fallout spirit could have made its way into the MMO. Compared to the other cancelled games mentioned, this one was doomed because of the Fallout IP being bought by Bethesda. Interplay was having financial difficulties in the early 2000s, except Fallout Online was still trucking along, even after the IP buyout. There were clauses in the purchase agreement of the Fallout IP that allowed Interplay to make a Fallout-based MMO, so it shouldn't have been a problem. What happened was, Bethesda ended up attempting to rescind the license, claiming that certain funding agreements weren't upheld. This led to a bunch of legal shenanigans until a settlement agreement was met, and the game was cancelled. There was development on an original IP called Project V13 to make up for the loss, but it didn't hit its fan funding goals, and nothing's come out about it recently. So sadly, it's probably just cancelled.
You're dead. Again.
The Cut Child Killer perk. So this is gonna get complicated. Child Killer isn't a perk at all. It's a reputation you get for performing juvenile population control, only found in Fallout 1 and 2. I'm not really sure if the entry is talking about the reputation or the idea of Child Killer literally being a cut perk, so I'll cover both. As a cut reputation, this could mean how Fallout 1 censors its child NPCs, making the reputation unachievable. So that is basically cutting it out of the game. However, there is something about Child Killer that was officially cut out during development on Fallout 2. That being the original piece of artwork tied to it. This is the art you get in the final release. This was the cut art. When even the artist himself says it's messed up, you know it's bad. But at the same time, I do get a kick out of it. Now, as for Child Killer being a cut perk, this is more of a spooky rumor than anything else. Keep in mind, Child Killer was cut out of the new games. It's not a thing at all in Bethesda's Fallout games. Kids are simply invulnerable to damage. This has a lot to do with different ratings boards and international releases, I'd imagine. There's also the fact that the jump from 2D to 3D is going to make things a lot more graphic, and raise a whole lot of PR hell. Fallout 1, with its pixel graphics, already had so many issues surrounding its violence. So imagine the controversy surrounding Fallout 3 if you could have been a child killer. Needless to say, it does make some sense why it's cut. Yet, I do remember there being some rumors and creepypastas about there being a cut child killer perk that would have unlocked child mortality. Most notably, there's the Lone Wolf radio creepypasta, which alleges how New Vegas had a cut quest where you could help a child killer and earn the perk for yourself. Obviously, this isn't real, but it's still a spooky idea that raises a what if. Kinda like other gaming rumors. What if you can somehow see Lara Croft naked? What if Luigi is secretly unlockable in Mario 64? What if I could get revenge on those annoying brats in Little Lamplight? Simply put, there is no child killer perk. It was just a reputation title you got in the old games for performing an evil act, and it's been understandably censored to avoid controversy. But like I said earlier, if you really want to, you can easily mod it into the new games and the classics. Fake Vault 13 is a location in Fallout 2. The real Vault 13 is a place you have to find during the main quest. An NCR citizen named Merc offers to sell you a holotape containing its exact location for 1,000 NCR dollars. Buy the holotape and you get coordinates to a fake Vault 13. The cave shape is the same, except there's no vault whatsoever, just construction signs. Definitely worth the $1,000. The protagonist of Fallout 1, the Vault Dweller, makes an appearance in Fallout Brotherhood of Steel as an NPC. He gives you a quest to find his Vault 13 flask, and he gives you multiple clues as to his background. Frankly, I don't really care for this fan service. Giving the Vault Dweller this definitive voice and badass personality was a bad call, because that character is supposed to be us. In Fallout 1, we got to roleplay as the Vault Dweller and determine who they were. That character was yours, and in BOS, they're not. For example, say you wanted to play as a woman Vault Dweller. Well, guess you were wrong. A pacifist who talks his way out of problems? Nope, the Vault Dwellers killed hundreds. To play devil's advocate, Fallout 2 also defined some player actions and made them canon, like helping out Necropolis or killing the Khans. Not to mention, there's the Vault Dweller's memoirs. But I still didn't like this, and I thought the Vault Dweller should have had a more ambiguous role as to not undercut player choices. Then here comes Brotherhood of Steel, which makes the Vault Dweller as ambiguous as a nuclear bomb. Heck, they even give him a voice.
I've dealt with mutants before. I still remember their master, his flesh crawling along the walls, a floor of wriggling fingers clutching at me.
I know their inclusion was clearly supposed to be a cool throwback, but ultimately, it's better that it just doesn't exist. Thankfully, that's the case, because BOS isn't a canon game. 53 Dead Claw Cave. So, not gonna lie, this entry had me pretty stumped. And thank you to everybody who reached out with their answers. It really is as simple as a cave with 53 Deathclaws in it. Now, as for what I think about this kind of cave, the Salvatores are the key for an alternative ending. The Salvatores are one of the crime families of New Reno, and specifically, they're the guys making shady deals with the Enclave in exchange for laser guns. They use them to take over the city if they're not taken care of. But I don't think this is the alternative ending that's being mentioned. Instead, I have two ideas on what this could mean. The first is that, originally, during the transaction between the Salvatores and Enclave, you would have been able to slip inside the Vertibird and be taken to Navarro base. It would have led to combat, but assuming you survived, you'd have been able to take a Vertibird to the oil rig and save your people. Instead of an oil tanker, the ending cutscene would have had to have shown a Vertibird instead. So that could have been the alternative ending. None of this is in the game, but it could have been, and the Salvatores would have played an important role in setting it up. The second idea I have is that maybe, since the Salvatores are closer to the Enclave than any other faction, they could have been a gateway to joining the Enclave and causing a completely different ending. It's a big stretch, I know, but keep in mind that you could join the Master in Fallout 1, who was completely anti-humanity. Not just anti-near humanity. The fact you can't join the bad guys in Fallout 2 by comparison, even if it makes sense, is a bit of a bummer. Basically, what I'm trying to say through this entry is, if joining the Enclave were to have been implemented, it'd have made more sense to do it through the Salvatores than just walking up to an Enclave soldier and asking to join. By doing favors for the Enclave through the Salvatores and proving yourself as a worthwhile asset, maybe you could have teamed up with them as a disposable near-human grunt, but hey, at least it's something. And it definitely would have made for a cool alternate ending. The talking heads of the original Fallouts were made using clay models way back in the 90s. As for their current whereabouts, it's a mystery. Some think they were unpreserved and destroyed by age. Others believe they might still be stored somewhere, but by and large, the consensus seems to be the same. These awesome clay models are lost and will probably stay that way. An alternative reading of this entry is the general loss of clay models or talking heads being used in the new Fallout games. Now, everything about character models is digitally designed. And while a little sad, it does make sense. It definitely saves development time, and it is telling that Tim Kane's later projects don't make use of clay modeling. That being said, the models were works of art, and them being both discontinued and missing is a genuine loss. Exodus is the renamed and reworked tabletop RPG adaptation of the Fallout D20 system, developed by Glutton Creeper Games. Now, if you hear D20 and you think Dungeons & Dragons, you're actually right on the money. The Fallout D20 system was genuinely using D&D rules, specifically that from 3rd edition. See, Wizards of the Coast released the D20 system and various D&D rules under a public copyright license called the Open Game License. Starting with 3rd edition, each edition of D&D has gotten one of these licenses, which, with certain guidelines detailed in a system reference document, allow for renditions of D&D to be released by third parties. Heck, even you could create an OGL game if you really wanted to. And that's exactly how Fallout D20 was being made. It wasn't an official partnership between Fallout devs and Wizards of the Coast. It was the result of Glutton Creeper Games working with Interplay and using the OGL. But still, we were getting Fallout D&D. And what's cool is that the Fallout D20 system was using D&D's 3rd edition, which is not only considered to have the best OGL content just because of how much there is, but that edition was also inspired by Fallout. According to Tim Kane, 3rd edition's designers told him that Fallout's perks inspired D&D's feats, so it would have been nice to see things come full circle. But sadly, Fallout D20 never officially came to be. Like Fallout Online, Exodus was a victim of Bethesda's purchase of the Fallout IP. Fortunately, Exodus was able to survive, thanks to some changes to the setting, and especially the name. In the world of Exodus, war never changes, but history has. There isn't just a space race. There's a human experiment race to create the world's first super soldier. This race started during World War II and continued into the Cold War. America does its best, but as a failsafe, creates the Freehold Project, an initiative to house important military personnel and families of any investors in the project in the face of nuclear annihilation. But it's not the Cold War that makes the world hot. It's the war on terror. China still strikes first, though. Nations get nuked, the Earth's axis tilts, and the world ends just as the Mayans predicted, on December 21st, 2012. Americans amass an exodus into the underground shelters below. And years later, when they reemerge, they'll find that, yeah, you guessed it. The game is bootleg Fallout. A lot of changes made outside the timeline are pretty minuscule overall. Instead of ghouls, you have ghouls spelt like this. Instead of the Vault Dwellers, you have the Shelter Dwellers. And instead of super mutants, you have...
Oh my goodness!
Look at this name! Who would call them this? There's a lot more comparisons I could get into. But as silly or uninspired as some of this might seem, I do think you have to keep in mind the context. Exodus isn't just some blatant ripoff of Fallout. It was going to be Fallout, and then it got the rug pulled out from under it. Kind of like what Fallout 1's devs went through with the GURPS license. They made their game to fit the GURPS tabletop system, only to have that license fizzle out. What did they do? They remodeled and renamed things, made the 3D6 system a D100 one, merged skills together, threw in more stats, traits blatantly stayed in, but advantages and disadvantages were merged together. Maybe the execution wasn't perfect, but the folks behind it were making the best of a bad situation. Just like Glutton Creeper Games here. Not the best execution in places, but I give them props. And if you read between the lines, it can easily be played as Fallout with D20 rules. At the end of the day, Exodus could have easily been the first official Fallout tabletop RPG. Too bad the Fallout IP had an Exodus of its own. Pat is the partner of the Vault Dweller from Fallout 1, and is mentioned in the introduction of Fallout 2's manual, written in the form of the Vault Dweller's memoirs. After being exiled from Vault 13, the Vault Dweller was eventually met with a group of their fellow residents, who had decided to leave the Vault and join them. Together, they journeyed north, founded the tribal village of Arroyo, and started getting busy. The Vault Dweller fell in love with one of their fellow tribespeople named Pat, who helped them lead the village and raise their children. Sadly, Pat ended up passing away before the Vault Dweller. My love perished years ago, and not a day goes by that I do not think of Pat's face. I see it every time I look at our children. It's a tiny piece of lore, and while it does straddle players with a definitive backstory and love interest, it also leaves some wiggle room for role-playing. Pat's gender isn't revealed, so you could still imagine the Vault Dweller being either a dude or a chick. Also, Pat's fate isn't directly revealed, so there's also wiggle room for that. If anything else, Pat did play a hand in helping the Vault Dweller create the village of Arroyo, and bring about generations of future leaders, including the Chosen One. Fallout Tactics not being canon is a claim that's been made over the years, including by the director of Bethesda Game Studios, Todd Howard. But here's the thing. While Tactics isn't canon, some of it is.
Even some like Fallout Tactics is there's some stuff from canon that from Fallout Tactics as well.
It's complicated. Basically, we know for certain that some elements of Tactics are canon, such as the Midwestern chapter of the Brotherhood of Steel, and the fact the Brotherhood makes use of Zeppelins. Everything else is kind of up in the air, from the game's villain, the Calculator, to Vault Zero and the true purpose of Vaults being a failed plan to have Vault Dwellers emerge to a mutant-free wasteland. There's already been some speculation that Fallout Tactics will just eventually become canon, so that's what I lean towards. We've gone from hearing how the game isn't canon to how some of it is. So maybe one day, Tactics not being canon won't be the case after all. To say Fallout 2 had a painful development would be a major understatement. A lot of Fallout fans decry New Vegas' development, saying Bethesda didn't give developer Obsidian Entertainment enough development time with only 18 months. Fallout 2 had 9 months. That's not even a year. Fergus Urquhart, leader of Interplay's RPG division Black Owl Studios, claims financial difficulties were creeping in due to the state of Interplay, which shortened and rushed their production time on the game. Worse yet, what little time there was to actually develop the game was allegedly plagued with issues. For the sake of clarity, I'm going to be using Tim Kane's video Why I Left Fallout 2 as the basis for the following claims. According to Tim, creator of the Fallout series who left its sequel partway into development, he had no plans on making a Fallout 2 right out the gate. That duty went to a different team months before Fallout 1 shipped. Considering that Fallout 1 was a B-team project, this was a C-team effort on the sequel. And it ran into an issue during the pitching stage. Namely, that Interplay founder Brian Forgor didn't like any of the pitches he saw. He wanted Tim to make one. 2 pitches later, Fallout 2 gets off the ground, and a reluctant Tim gets roped into leading the project by Forgor. I say reluctant because that's the truth. Tim didn't even want to make sequel pitches, getting help by fellow developers Leonard Boyarsky and Jason Anderson for them. So you can imagine that he didn't want to lead an entire new project. The reason for that is, by his own account, Tim was exhausted. Fallout 1 was the result of crunch, and Tim knew that Fallout 2 would be as well. Then, since Fallout 1 was a surprise success, executives started meddling with the sequel. With Fallout 1 being a B project, there was actually little oversight and more creative leeway, because there wasn't a lot of faith in the project. Fallout 2, meanwhile, didn't have that same luxury. For example, consider the infamous Temple of Trials tutorial section. Hated for being an unskippable and needless inclusion, was also hated by the game's designers for the same reasons. It was just mandated by the higher-ups, who also mandated it not be skippable, even on later playthroughs. You know, at that point, they could have also mandated it be better designed. Come on. I'm going to chime in here and say I think this interference may back up what Fergus said about Interplay's financial difficulties. Interplay was probably struggling, so having this surprise hit under their belt gave them the incentive to guarantee an even bigger one. It's just that they were so overeager to get that success, they went about things the wrong way. Like, they could have let Leonard Boyarsky, Fallout 1's lead artist and the designer of the game's box art, design the sequels. The marketing department was prepared to just outsource the design with no input from any of the designers. Higher-ups made the call, no doubt, and it lines up with the idea that they wanted a better performing sequel. They needed something that could reel more gamers into the series, even if it meant overruling the very people who made it a success in the first place. That's why you get decisions like the box art debacle, and the Temple of Trials being a mandatory inclusion. Interplay needed another hit with Fallout 2, so it became their game. The straw that broke the camel's back was Tim having his pay bonus cut by Forgor. This was punishment for not giving up the name of a designer that accidentally caused a game-crashing bug during Fallout 1's development. As a result, Tim resigned, and Leonard and Jason followed. The creator of the series left the production of the sequel, along with the lead artist on the original. Just let that sink in for a minute. The good news is that Fallout 2 did survive, with Fergus and Matthew Norton taking over as lead designers. It also hit its goal of shipping in October 1998. The game is considered today to be a classic RPG, and some consider it to be better than Fallout 1, but it did go through the ringer to reach release. While the Bethesda games are known for their mod scene, the original Fallout games had mods of their own. We've covered a couple already, but these were mods that were eventually released. There exist mods for the classic Fallouts that have never seen the light of day. Lost mods, drifting in the desolate forum boards of the internet. This entry will cover some of them. For starters, there's a project called Fan-Made Fallout being developed by Dark Underlord, a staff member on the RPG Codex. He jumped at the chance to create a new Fallout experience once Black Isle released the game editor in 2003. But in his own words, the mod was a stupidly ambitious project. Lack of time, complexity, and requiring multiple people to work together online to get something done led to its inevitable demise. Dark Underlord was kind enough to dump the mod's files and information online though, so we do have a picture of what could have been. Set in eastern Texas in the year 2201, players would emerge from Vault 31 on a mission to save their vault from a reactor meltdown. Rather than a water chip, you'd be looking for a copy of a Mr. Handy operating system to help fix the vault's Mr. Handys. They're the only things capable of going into the reactor room and fixing the problem without turning into goop. Save the vault, and you move to the next part of the main quest. You'd be sent out again to find what weapons exist in the outside world, and how much of a threat it poses against Vault 31. You discover a conflict between the weapons and ammo manufacturer, Red River, and a secretive group of super mutant survivors from the Master's army, who are brainwashing people with hospital technology to bring about their dream of unity. There'd be another faction war in Vault 31, between the trusted, executives who acted like royalty and armed their children, and the untrusted, maintenance workers and employees who were sectionalized from the higher-ups. Players could determine who to side with, and whether or not there'd be a change in leadership. The endgame would involve reaching a conclusion between Red River, the super mutants, and Vault 31. And it seems the peaceful option actually meant destroying the super mutants. Fair enough. Also, unlike Fallout 1, it seems you could finish the game without needing to save your vault. It could go boom, and you wouldn't get a game over because of it. There'd be a giant crater where your home once was, with the consequence, besides everyone you know and care for being dead, being that you can't get any cool advanced energy weapons out of it. There was a lot of promise here. There would have been dumb dialogue, which is always a plus in my eyes, murder mystery style quests without a clear culprit, a trial of the player, and a talking computer named Abraham with personality issues, which... Moving on, we have Fallout Between Good and Evil. Being led by one Mr. Lizard, the game was set in the year 2139, and was set to have a more personal story. Picture a western tale of revenge, where players sought justice for the death of their father Albert while searching for their girl Chloe. And apparently, it wouldn't have a happy ending. There's a lot of dead links for the project, and you'll need to use the Wayback Machine to see everything that was on offer. Lots of concept art is still floating around, however, and we do know that it isn't going to be happening. Finally, there was the Tangut Prophecy, a historical RPG set in 12th century China and designed by Crazy Loon in the fan-made F-Online engine. Bringing it up on the RPG Codex and resurrecting its thread is a surefire way to inflict pain and gain bad karma, because people genuinely looked forward to it. Beginning in the year 1167, players could choose one of 4 races with 4 corresponding language skills. They'd enter a campaign filled with mysteries, conspiracies, and good old-fashioned role-playing. Quests could interconnect with one another, on top of offering multiple methods of completion and hard moral decisions to make. As for combats, the player could engage in mounted battles, and take part in what Crazy Loon called mini-battles, where the player could lead 20 to 30 warriors against an enemy band, with an apparent plethora of tactical options at your disposal. It was ambitious, it was different, and it was filled with potential. So what the hell happened? Where is the Tangut Prophecy? We don't actually fully know, except that it's not coming out. According to user Islet, who made music for the project, Crazy Loon went off the grid and put the project on hold for reasons that won't be disclosed. Islet even says they don't know if or when the project will continue. This was back in 2014, and the project has been dormant ever since. I'm sure there's a ton more mods that are lost or not well known about, but these were the ones that stood out to me the most. If you know any I haven't covered, let me know in the comments below, and I could always do a separate video on them. The Master is right. This refers to the idea that the villain in the first Fallout game, the Master, may have been justified in his ideas that humanity is a warring, doomed species. His mission is to advance humanity into one unified race of mutants, at the expense of humanity, forcibly experimenting on normals and converting them into mutants, as well as planning on sterilizing any survivors in his path. For his crimes against humanity, the Master explains himself.
The unity will bring about the master race. Master! One able to survive, or even thrive in the wasteland. As long as there are differences, we will tear ourselves apart fighting each other. We need one race. Race! One goal. Goal! One people to move forward to our destiny. Of course.
Mutants are best equipped to deal with the world today.
Who else? The ghouls? Please. Normals? They brought nuclear death to us all. This will be the age of mutants. All that resist? Yes. And all those that are required for the
Unity?
As well. The remainder will be allowed to live out their days, but under unity, control,
And protection.
but none shall breed, for they will be the last of their race.
Obviously, what the Master is doing is wrong, but his reasoning isn't all that off. Normal human beings are destructive and divisive. In the world of Fallout, this is doubly so. It was normals that brought about the end of the world. It was normals that kept fighting each other in the rubble rather than rebuilding together to survive. And if we're getting armchair psychologist here, it was normals who created the FEV that turned a normal human like Richard Gray into a horrific, fleshy abomination. Humanity causes grief and suffering, because like war, humanity never changes. So, the Master wanted to force some change, and he was fine letting the ends justify the means. Ironically, grief and suffering are exactly what the Master causes in his war against mankind. He thinks he's saving mankind by changing it for the better. He's unifying the people and properly preparing them for life in the wasteland, forever powerful and rad-free. Unknown to him, the super mutants he's forcing normals to become are sterile, a fact that's kept hidden from him by his own followers and yes-men. And if you show the Master evidence of this sterility, this is how he handles the news.
Preposterous! The FEV2 virus doesn't destroy the reproductive organs of those it mutates. Do you have proof? I must digest this information. One moment. I understand now. You made a clever forgery. You made this up to fool me. Fool!
Me.
But it cannot be. This would mean that
All my work.
has been for nothing. Everything that I've tried to a failure. It can't be. I don't think that I can continue to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness. There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have
Hope.
It's sad stuff, and it shows the Master is more than just some one-note cartoon villain. He truly did care about saving humanity, and it helps support some people's notions that maybe there was something to the madness. Maybe humans would be better off as unified mutants instead of divided normals. Maybe the Master was right all along. Personally, I don't think the Master was right at all. But I do think there was a nugget of truth about his views on humanity, as a squabbling, warring species that destroys as much as it creates. If this wasn't the case, the series wouldn't have the human factions and conflicts we see in each subsequent game. We wouldn't see the NCR grow from a peaceful agrarian community into a corrupt, expansionist empire. Mankind will remain divided and destructive, just like the Master said it would. An infected foot is technically something seen in the Fallout games. There is an extra mutated toe you can get in Fallout 2 for standing in toxic waste for too long, which you can actually get as an item. And consume, if you're willing to go there. Also, there's this piece of art in Fallout 3 during the Generalized Occupational Aptitude Test, or GOAT for short. The question is how you deal with a Vault Dweller who has a strange, growing infection on his foot. It's in line with how the Fallout games play around with the camp and pulp of 50s science fiction. With radiation, you wouldn't actually wind up with an extra toe or as a living zombie. The games do show some of the terrors of radiation exposure, but at the same time also give us stuff like an infected foot. The toxic fandom of Fallout refers to the Fallout fan community, and not toxic in the conceptually relevant way. It's the bitter internet kind of way, where passionate fans are locked in eternal tribalistic struggles of both defending and criticizing the franchise. That includes me. But I want to clarify that I'm not going to trudge through internet drama or declare one side better than the other. For one, because that's not what this channel is about, and two, this isn't just a matter of old versus new fans. There's so many different groups here, you'd think I was talking about factions in Fallout itself. There's fans of the classic AAA games, there's fans of the Bethesda games, there's fans who only think Fallout 1 was good and everything afterward was some form of lesser fanfiction. Fans who think Fallout was best as an isometric series. Fans who can't play the isometric titles and can only stomach the first-person games. There's fans of both eras of Fallout, or of certain games from both eras. You get the picture. It's an old, popular franchise, so you're gonna get a lot of different takes about its changes over time and the direction it's heading down. That's only natural. You see it with other fandoms too, including the crazy amounts of passion for the IP that leads to anger and resentment of not just the franchise, but other people. And then there's the fact Fallout isn't a complete work of fantasy. It's alt history set in our world. So now you're gonna get interesting fusions of passion and politics here and there. In a nutshell, that's what this entry means when it says the fandom's toxic. It certainly can be, but I also think any fandom is. The more fans you attract to something, the more waste you'll inevitably get. And on the plus side, I think the passion Fallout fans have for the franchise has spurred some of the greatest tributes I've seen for a piece of media ever. The cosplay, the fan art, the mods, the full-on fan games being made, and tabletop adaptations fans have built over the years. People love Fallout, and want to show that love online in their own crazy ways. Sometimes it's too crazy, and it causes an entry like this. But I do love this fandom, and I'm part of it for a reason. Frank Horrigan is the final boss in Fallout 2. And he's no pushover. Sporting the highest stats out of any enemy in the old games, and a number of combat turrets if you don't have the presidential access key, it's going to be one heck of a fight. So naturally, there's gonna be discourse like the fake quote this entry is named. There's gonna be people who are convinced you absolutely need a guide to beat Frank Horrigan, when you don't actually need one. People have beat Horrigan without guides before. I mean, I'm not one of them, but this is kind of awkward. It definitely helps to know you need the presidential access key off the dead president, as well as having 6 intelligence and a 100 in science to be able to use this terminal and turn the combat turrets into allies. If you don't have enough intelligence or science, you could always stock up on mentats and skill points before going to the oil rig, then splurge out when the time is right. You could also turn the difficulty down to easy mode and automatically raise your skills up a bit if you want. Trust me on this, getting those turrets on your side really does help change the course of the battle. Then there's the Enclave guards right near Frank Horrigan that you can recruit with a speech check to help you take him down. Simply put, there are multiple options to make the fight easier, and it isn't impossible to kill Frank Horrigan without a guide. Aaron L. Wieland was a proud Marine and Fallout YouTuber who went by the name Fallout Entertainment Industries. Aaron produced videos on build ideas as well as masterclasses on gameplay exploits, or techniques as he called them. I'd go as far as to say Aaron could very easily be the best Fallout 2 player in recorded history. The guy knew this game like the back of his hand. There are exploits he goes over I haven't seen before or since. Stuff like re-sneaking or the robbery mechanics where you can loot NPCs mid-stun or during their last turn are useful exploits to know, and I learned them from his videos. Aaron was someone who clearly loved Fallout 2, was passionate about it, and wanted to share that passion to the world. But tragically, on September 14th, 2022, at the age of 38, Aaron took his own life. This came after a long struggle with mental illness, and it's this illness which also led to a hospital attack scare situation. In a several-hour livestream, Aaron accused Rochester General Hospital in Rochester, New York of molesting him, making mention of specific staff by name. It was this video that led to the FBI alerting the Rochester Police Department of a possible threat, who in turn alerted the hospital, which went into lockdown. The sheriff's bomb squad unit was then sent to Aaron's residence, using a robot and drone to enter the property, where a gun trap was found aimed at the front door. Ultimately, police found that Aaron was not a threat against the hospital, citing that his video contained no direct threats against any hospital staff members.
Investigators began to review the hours-long video and determined that the male in question was making suicidal comments and did not make any direct threats towards Rochester General Hospital. No danger was ever present at Rochester General Hospital, and all of their employees, patients, and their families are safe.
The sole casualty of the incident was Aaron. It's a tragedy, and I'm going to be honest, it's the reason why the only entry I'm not going to cover in this series is one called Fallout Entertainment Industries Ego. It just doesn't sit right with me, and I want to make it clear that I want to find a balance between not disrespecting the dead, but still staying informative. I know this stuff sucks and it hurts, but it's important to show why mental health is the real deal. You can go from being positive and loving to a place where your mind brings out the worst of you, faster than you'd ever think it would. It's devastating. And sadly, there are cases where that worst part of you becomes what you're remembered for. Not with Aaron, though. While he did delete his own channel, there are archives that still exist showing some of the skills he had. Aaron's fans say he was truly one of a kind, and I believe it. He was extremely passionate about Fallout 2, eager to share his knowledge about it with others and help people in his own way. So thank you for your service, Aaron, and I pray you rest in peace.
Fallout, an increasingly important word in the atomic and hydrogen age. The facts from Federal Civil Defense tell us that fallout could hurt you, might even kill you. Well, what about it, mister? What is this fallout stuff? Fallout is nothing more than particles of matter in the air made radioactive by nuclear explosions. Sooner or later, however, they settle to Earth. This is fallout, and it can be very dangerous if you don't know what to do about it. Well, do you know what to do about it, Grandpa?
Not yet, young man, but I will.
There are 4 major characteristics of an A-bomb or H-bomb explosion. They are blast, heat, initial radiation, and residual radiation. All this clear so far, sister?
Sure, but you've talked about fallout from enemy bombing.
Our government very carefully tests only small nuclear devices in the United States. So these are the facts that should reassure and encourage you. Be ready to assist in defense preparations in your community if your help is needed. For Fallout is only one Fallout.
Fallout Tactics is a combat game, so there's no way to do a pacifist run. This is just a goofy joke. Next entry. The Regulators are a faction from the LA Boneyard, who reside in the town of Adatum as its armed protectors. That is, if you take their word for it. Other groups describe Adatum as a labor camp, and the Regulators as a vicious group of slavers who kill and kidnap whoever they please. Why is this the case? Do they do it for power? Or because of a greater power? No, I'm just kidding. The Regulators are never stated to be working for the Master. It could have made for an interesting twist given their proximity to the Cathedral. The Regulator commander could have been in cahoots with the Children of the Cathedral to gather a labor force for future projects in exchange for protection and keeping their humanity. Better to rule in hell than serve in heaven and all that. But no, the Regulators are just another power-hungry group of people. Only they figured out the power of deceit. All the Fallout 1 NPCs having items isn't actually the case. For example, the slave girls at the con's base don't have any, so there you go. Arroyo is the starting town in Fallout 2, and if you really want to, you could wipe it off the map. None of the characters are unkillable, even your own mom. You could slay all the NPCs in Arroyo and leave the village filled with corpses. Only this would result in a game over.
Chosen, the village dies. All of our futures die too.
The campaign needs Arroyo and its people to survive, so destroying them isn't exactly optimal. People think the Temple of Trials is difficult, and they have low intelligence scores. You just have to kill ants. If you can't kill an ant, well, you're a moron! In all seriousness, the Temple of Trials is one of the more infamous parts of Fallout, and it is something that gets criticized for its difficulty, pacing, and plausibility in the world. It's something the developers wish wasn't in the game. That's all you need to know. But still, I'm going to give you a rundown of the tutorial and hopefully show you the path to a triple-digit IQ score. Lord knows I needed it. First things first, Fallout 2 doesn't start like Fallout 1. No kidding, but what I mean is, you're not given any kind of starting gun in the sequel like you are in the first game. You only start off with a melee weapon, which, yeah, you can throw, but that takes into account your throwing skill. Assuming you don't want to go with a melee or throwing build, you might think you're in for a bad time when you get inside the temple and realize it's filled with giant enemy ants. Not to worry, just outrun them and end combat manually once you're out of their vicinity. Also, this is a good time to make sure you've got combat speed cranked up. With that set, open the door and just proceed to the next one. You don't have to bother exploring around, you'll find giant enemy scorpions if you do. Even when you get to the door and realize it's locked, just lockpick the door open and proceed. Run forward, grab the explosive, go to the next door, make sure not to set it too early like I did because my intelligence score was too low, and get a healthy distance away before it blows. Then proceed to the next door, open it up, save the game, and have your encounter with Cameron, the final test of the temple. You can just use your speech skill to talk your way past him, but assuming you go to blows, this is why running from the ants and scorpions was a good idea. That way, you can preserve enough health to beat the encounter. If you fail, just reload at the door and fight until you win. That's the temple in a nutshell. It's not the worst tutorial ever, but it is a bad one. My main criticism is that not only is it a waste of time, it expects more of the player than Fallout 1's own tutorial. Yeah, that's what the cave section kind of was. It was short, immersive, and to the point. It didn't disempower players. You could use fists, or a gun. All you had to do was leave the cave and you were good. In the temple, meanwhile, you have to waste time running through different rooms and screens. You even have to make use of your skill decks on the first locked door you run into. Honestly, I overthought this the first time I played the game. I thought there was a key somewhere in the area, so I searched around for it, getting stung needlessly. Turns out, there is no key. No matter your skill proficiency and lockpick, you're just supposed to use it on the door. Problem solved. So, I guess I lived up to this entry after all. Fallout 1 children exist, but not in the current Steam or GOG release of the game. You're going to need a mod to patch them back in. And while they don't add a lot to the experience, they do remind one that the world, even after the apocalypse, is still turning. The Fallout 1 demo town is a small armpit of the desert called Scrap Heap. It looks a lot like Junktown, except even to the locals, Junktown's the better spot. Scrap Heap runs on a power generator fueled by Brahmin dung, which is at the center of a gang war. The Crips and the Fools compete for control of the generator, and there's multiple ways to deal with their gang war. You could wipe out one gang or the other, wipe both gangs out, or if you think Scrap Heap doesn't live up to its name already, you can make it one by sabotaging the generator. Killing Vault 13 at the start of Fallout 1 isn't a good idea. Unlike Fallout 2, where at least you get a game over after killing important NPCs and leaving, it's impossible to kill the Overseer of Vault 13. He's an invincible character that'll decimate the player, and you'll anger him if you shoot any Vault Dwellers. The Vertibird ending is a hypothetical ending for Fallout 2 based on cut content from the game. Basically, the way Fallout 2's main quest goes, you need to access a tanker to drive it to the Enclave oil rig, where your tribe is being held hostage. Save the day, get everyone on board the tanker, drive off, cue explosion in the background. That's the standard Fallout 2 ending. But originally, players would have an alternate means of getting to the oil rig, using a vertibird stolen from Camp Navarro. This is cut out of the game, but it raises the question. If it hadn't been cut, surely there would have been an alternate cutscene where, instead of showing the tanker in the ending, there'd be a vertibird. And there's some other questions this ending raises. Like, how are you going to fit an entire tribe inside one vertibird? It makes more sense with the tanker, doesn't it? So what? Are you gonna have to steal multiple vertibirds? Hope your tribal family knows what autopilot is? In that sense, the vertibird ending is an interesting idea, and I wonder how it would have been pulled off. r/Classic Fallout is a subreddit that, in its own words, is a Fallout community for the early games. Expect a community dedicated to the older Fallouts, with questions, appreciation posts, and fan art surrounding the classic games. Fallout Tactics never had a functional multiplayer. This is going off some comments about how exploitable multiplayer was. The lack of balance probably didn't make it feel functional, hence the entry. We've talked about Fallout 1's bad endings, including the super mutant invasion of Vault 13, where you could rat out the vault and allow it to be overrun. What we didn't talk about was that, originally, this wasn't the only way to initiate this bad end. Fallout 1's truly worst ending is that 500 days into a playthrough, if the Master or Mariposa military base weren't taken care of, the mutants would find your vault, automatically initiating the bad ending cutscene. If you'd bought water from the water merchants at the hub, make that 400 days instead. The mutants get the info out of them during their invasion across the west coast, destroying every major settlement as far as Shady Sands.
The mutant army marches as far north as Shady Sands, razing the small town to the ground.
However, the truly worst ending is no longer possible to get. The game was patched and re-released without this 500-day limit, so no mutant invasion really threatens your vault or any settlement for that matter, other than Necropolis. At most, you'll get bad ending slides saying that the towns were destroyed, but otherwise, they'll remain intact during a playthrough. I do think it's a little disappointing we lost out on the second phase time limit stuff, like the bad ending and the mutant invasion of the different towns. I think it would have added more reactivity to the campaign and made the super mutants more of a threat. If they were actively destroying towns and limiting your chance of getting resources or allies to work against them, that's scary stuff. And so was the truly worst ending. We actually did this already. Moving on. Interplay's Fallout Online is a cancelled MMO project that was in development by Masthead Studios and team members of Interplay. Set in over 65,000 square miles of the wasteland, there'd have been multiple playable races and starting locations. Player-run towns and guilds were promised, as well as the cryptic threat that the Master lives. There's not a ton known about the game, or whether it would have been good for that matter. Reading about the project, there's definitely some stuff that sounds off, for lack of a better word. For example, the game would have started with yet another apocalypse, and one that's kinda overkill at that. But the biggest red flag to me is the pseudo time travel angle. Not actual time travel apparently, but you are still going to see moments in previous games and old characters in the present. And they mentioned multiple timelines, so I think the time travel would have been more like exploring the multiverse, but even still, it really would have had to been handled well to work. Essentially, just do it in that classic Fallout spirit. Give me wacky sci-fi, but played straight and with a really dark twist. Like, instead of an energy weapon, you get a man-melter. Instead of teleportation, you get the Philadelphia experiment or the jaunt. Instead of fan service seeing timelines of previous games and fan-favorite characters, I want to see doomed Earths and the folks cursed to live on them. Fallout Online was cancelled, and we did eventually get Fallout 76 developed by Bethesda. But one has to wonder what the original Fallout MMO experience would have been like. The games are perfect. Except not exactly. I think even this entry agrees, seeing the quotation marks. There are objective flaws with the original games, including typos in the dialogue, houses you can steal from and there's no reactions or consequences whatsoever, and the fact that some good endings in the game files are just flat out unattainable without mods. Then you get into more subjective things, like the limited use of certain skills, the jarring reference-based comedy of the sequel, and the fact that inventory in both is a single column. Also, not gonna lie, the writing in these games does fluctuate a bit. It's like you can get some of the best in the genre, and then get stuff like this. Serviceable, and then Oh, and the Gorus cloak animation you have to wait through every single time. Don't get me wrong now, the games are classic RPGs for a reason. They come close to being flawless through their systems, art, atmosphere, and RPG spirit. But to quote an old childhood trauma of mine, and neither are the classic Fallouts. This is a speculative entry around the true reason behind the cancellation of Fallout Online. The official reasoning is that there was a legal dispute between Bethesda and Interplay. Things were settled and the game got canned. But were funding agreements with the Fallout license truly the culprit behind this cancellation? Is this actually the reason Bethesda wanted Fallout Online cancelled, or is there another reason we don't know about? I don't know, but in the spirit of this entry, we're going to take a wild guess and say, yeah, there's definitely another reason here. Perhaps Fallout Online was expected to fail. Maybe Bethesda agreed to the project only because they thought a struggling company like Interplay wouldn't be able to produce it. This was an MMO after all, which, just like its name implies, is a massive undertaking. Many MMO projects have failed before, and surely Fallout Online could have joined the list. But maybe when Fallout Online was underway against all odds, Bethesda decided it had made a mistake that needed correcting.
I want him dead because he cramps my business.
Negative skills are possible to get in the classic Fallout games, and thank you to Ravina TTV for their comments, because I did miss this the first time around. You're going to want to dump a stat completely so you lower its skills by a lot, then take the gifted trait which reduces all skills by 10%, and you're bound to see some skills go negative. Weirdly enough, while I was testing this out, I actually got a successful hit with a negative throwing skill, so I don't think it breaks the game or anything, but you definitely won't succeed as often. Harold abandoned Richard is the idea that Harold, whether intentionally or not, left his companion Richard Gray for dead. For context, before their transformations, Harold was a trader and Richard was a doctor. After a series of fatal mutant attacks on caravans, Richard stepped up to the plate and led an expedition to find the source of the killers, with Harold being one of his followers. Evidently, Harold respected Richard a lot for his intelligence, and trusted his leadership enough to follow him to the Mariposa military base. The two lost many good companions as they made their way inside. Until finally, they found the vats.
We made it to some sort of central core, like a plant of some sort. That's when it happened. A robot crane crashed into us. Last I saw Gray, he was flying through the air and into some sort of acid bath. I was in bad shape and, well, I passed out.
No, you idiot! I just said I never saw him again, didn't I?
Well, I have no idea. Woke up in the wasteland, barely hanging on. Got lucky and some traders I knew found me days later. Good thing, since I was already changing. They brought me here, and here I've been since.
Now, I think Harold is a kind enough soul. And obviously storming into a death trap and barely surviving takes some massive stones. But needless to say, Harold didn't go back in to recover Richard. He saw him go into what he figured was an acid bath, and after waking up, he got out of there. He abandoned Richard, which in turn led to the creation of the Master. Again, Harold is a good enough sort, and it was a completely understandable decision not to go back for Richard. That being said, what if we're wrong? What if we're actually being played like a fiddle? I mean, Fallout 1 is a bleak game. There's even an entry about it. What I'm saying is, if you want to stretch some things, you could read the situation in a different way. After all, this is the same game where you're not actually the chosen one. You're just a pawn for the Overseer, who talks you up after you picked the short straw to leave the vault. It's very, very easy to forget, but people lie to you, and not everything's as clear as it seems. So, maybe Harold isn't only guilty of not trying to save Richard. Maybe he didn't get knocked out at all, passing out in a mutant-infested base with killer robots, and just coming to outside? He did have a buddy to help him out, but they could have easily been part of the cover story. Harold could have just run off after getting struck by the crane and watching Richard take an FEV bath, and lies about it to not seem like a coward. Keeps him from looking bad to cap givers like yourself. Then, if you really want to get bleak, you might just think this is all a lie. That there was no automated crane that swung down and pushed anybody. That Harold basically shot Richard in the foot to make his escape. He shoved him into a vat, got some splashback that turned him green, and ran off to save his own skin. Karma practically tore it away. Just food for thought the next time you spirit caps over sob stories. Wanamingos are an enemy creature that appears in Fallout 2, being a species of monsters that live in underground hives, hunt in packs, and have a queen who lays eggs. They're also called aliens, and they're just straight up aliens from Aliens. They look like xenomorphs and they function the same way, having a queen that lays eggs. Except they aren't technically aliens. Chris Avallone made it a point in the Fallout Bible to explain how they're not actually aliens, but instead are FEV experiments. They were designed as bioweapons meant for the invasion of other countries. Them being alien to those nations, and just generally looking like something out of this world, you can see where the name comes from. Joshua Graham, also known as the Burned Man, is a fan favorite character from Fallout New Vegas, appearing in the DLC expansion Honest Hearts. He was a Mormon missionary who, alongside a man named Edward Salo, founded Caesar's Legion, converting and conquering wasteland tribes into an expansionist empire replicating the Roman Empire. Salo became Caesar, Joshua became his first legate, and then Joshua led Legion forces to defeat during the first Battle of Hoover Dam, so he became the Burned Man. Covered in pitch, set ablaze, and tossed into the Grand Canyon as punishment. By some miracle, Joshua lives, and by Honest Hearts has renewed his faith. He's a religious character on the path to redemption, and many players love his lines and story.
In a world filled with misery and uncertainty, it is a great comfort to know that, in the end, there is light in the darkness.
Again, he's a fan favorite for a good reason. So it might interest some to know that he was first set to appear in the cancelled Fallout 3 or Project Van Buren, having had much of his character reworked for New Vegas. So if so much got changed about him, what would Joshua Graham have originally been like? For starters, he wasn't the Burned Man. He was the Hanged Man, found hanging in Fort Bandon, and still alive somehow. Release him, and he becomes a strong early game companion, with some notable drawbacks. In Van Buren, Joshua starts off as an evil character. You're not finding a man in search of redemption. You're finding someone in need of it. He'll antagonize local tribes, mistranslate their words to create conflict, and cause problems with other companions, making a pacifist run hard. He'll also carry the Jinx trait, making a playthrough itself hard. But with enough good old charisma, you can convince the Hanged Man to change his ways. Or not. You can also decide not to recruit him and just let him hang if you want. To me, what stands out the most about Van Buren's Joshua is the idea of a companion influencing the player. We've seen in the series how an evil player can influence a character. But what about an evil character influencing the player? Lying and mistranslating to cause conflicts, trying to warp a player's worldview in the process, and make them act the way they want. There's a lot of potential here, and it could have been really cool to see. While I like the Joshua Graham we did get in New Vegas, I do wonder what the Burned Man would have been like as the Hanged Man. We won't have these games back. we probably won't get another Fallout with the same old school spirit. The spirit of role-playing, of delving into dark, morbid settings of mankind's reconstruction, not afraid to take risks and challenge players. We did get New Vegas, but we also really lucked out with that one. And now, Bethesda doesn't want to outsource the franchise anymore. Maybe they'll have to concede on that with Microsoft being their current owner, which allegedly is pushing for another Fallout to be released sooner than later. If Bethesda isn't ready, maybe Microsoft would give another company a shot at a spin-off, such as Obsidian Entertainment, who they also acquired. However, with how much the game industry has changed, I don't think we'd get another great Fallout game. Heck, I'm even reluctant for Obsidian to get another crack at Fallout. A big thing is Chris Avellone being gone, one of their best writers. And he didn't just leave the company, he had a complete falling out with it, claiming Obsidian attempted to have him sign a separation agreement that removed his right to work on RPGs, knowing the financial issues he was having with his family. I know the decisions about Avellone were done by higher-ups and not the artists or designers who work hard on those teams, but have we gotten the same quality as past Obsidian games recently? I don't think so. As flawed and janky as those past games are to people, can we really say we take Avowed or The Outer Worlds over Knights of the Old Republic 2? Over Alpha Protocol? Or heck, Fallout New Vegas? New Vegas really was lightning in a bottle, and with how different things are now, I don't see a follow-up reaching that same level of greatness. I wish it would, but after The Outer Worlds, where Tim and Leonard got another shot at an RPG, I don't know. I don't see Obsidian or Bethesda or anyone releasing a great Fallout game like the originals. I don't see devs taking the same risks as those games, and I don't see us getting them back. What I do see, however, is a future where we'll see the spirit of the original games return, just with a different name and skin. We've already had the likes of Atom RPG and its follow-up, but there's a lot more to look forward to as well. We're gonna get a sequel to the Total Conversion mod Olympus 2207, there's the New Blood interactive game with art by Red 88 Guns, there's a series of ancient Greek mythology games coming out, and whatever Black Designer and the Sonora devs are cooking for their original RPG. I'm sure there's more than that, but bottom line is, I do believe we'll eventually get games that are like Classic Fallout again. It's just that we won't be getting any classic Fallouts ever again. Van Buren would have failed. Back during the Brotherhood of Steel entry, I mentioned how Interplay was in such dire straits that no Hail Mary game would have saved them. That includes Van Buren, no matter its quality. We've had plenty of phenomenal games that failed to save their companies. Look no further than Looking Glass Studios, who brought us classics like the Thief games and System Shock 2, but were unable to save themselves financially. If Van Buren had released, to glowing praise no less, would that have truly been enough to save a company circling the drain? Probably not. There's also the problem that consoles were arguably the bigger markets in the early 2000s. I think an old school RPG like Van Buren would have suffered against the mass appeal of simpler console games. That's where developers were going, streamlining their products for. In that case, who knows the reception Van Buren would have gotten? For all we know, it could have suffered sales-wise and been unfairly judged by people who don't know how to play games. I do wish it came out, but more than likely, Van Buren would have failed. Skynet is an AI companion in Fallout 2, and he will betray any players who insult it. I mean, it should make sense not to mess with a character whose name is a Terminator reference, but if you really want to, be prepared to deal with the consequences. In researching this entry, I also found some talk about a glitch in which Skynet will straight up randomly betray the player, so I thought I'd mention that as well. The Master was responsible for creating the Psychers, a group of humans with psychic powers. This is a reference to the Warhammer series, which has its own Psychers. I'm not saying it's completely unknown, but I am surprised more people don't bring up the fact that the Master actually had psychic powers, and the Psychers stand as the biggest proof of that fact. Tim Kaine is in the game files of Fallout 1. Want proof? Go to the credits, type in boom, and then this will happen. Also, changing the icon larger than 32 by 32 replaces the game logo with Tim's head. So Tim is in the game files. Like the cut quests, there were planned locations in Fallout 1 and 2 which got cut, mainly due to a lack of time to properly implement them. For example, in Fallout 1, there was the Shrine, the hideout of the Vipers gang who we talked about earlier in the series. This would have been a cultish camp, with the pit right in the middle of it, containing tunnels and mutant vipers that the gang fed their sacrifices. These were usually prisoners stored in the cages, prison pits made to house future gifts to the serpent gods, and guarded by the group's most elite warriors called the Crimson Tongue. Finally, there was a ceremonial lodge called the Hall of Ascension, and a meeting room of government duties called the Sanctuary, where the Viper's leader and High Priest Asp resides, his throne being made of the skull and bones of two great serpents slain by his father Faust, who founded the gang. There would have also been another gang base located by the LA Boneyard, which belonged to the Jackals. This was a cannibal group entirely cut out of Fallout 1, and so was their home base. Presumably, it would have served as a kind of dungeon, since the Jackals were hostile. While not cut out of the game, the warehouse in the Boneyard was once completely different. It was originally intended to be the home base of the Rippers gang, which would most definitely be a dungeon crawl, leading you to kill their leader, the king of the Boneyard himself, Tangler. In the final game, a lot of the gangs would be dropped, and the Ripper's home would be occupied by a different kind of Ripper. Utopia, or Irvine, California, was set to be a paradise protected by giant steel walls and killer robots, the results of the Irvine Land Corporation. Picture a mix between Delta City and, Wall-E. The people live in a perfect pre-war-like society, but they're hopelessly stupid and reliant upon the robots, who are controlled by a supercomputer in the center of Utopia. Right by this place would have been the Interplay Studios office building, with Brian Fargo's still intact Dodge Viper and skeletons of the employees still trapped inside the building. The game would have made the Viper out to be something that could be repaired and driven around, but it never truly could be, meaning that the Interplay designers deserved to get nuked after all. Lastly, the Burrows was an oasis filled with jungle-like plant life and horrific furry creatures, but we'll get to that later in this video. As for Fallout 2, a whole lot of places got cut out, including the primitive tribe. So, the first companion you can meet in Fallout 2 is Sulek, a tribal whose village was attacked by slavers and whose sister got kidnapped by them. There's no resolution to these problems, because Sulek's village and sister aren't in the game, only some of his fellow tribals, who appear in a random encounter. But originally, Sulek's village, the primitive tribe, was going to be in the game. They would have been a highly spiritual people. They believe spirits influence the natural world, and try talking to them by piercing their own noses with bones. Next, there would have been the Abbey of Lost Knowledge, and this was a really cool idea. I wish it was in the game. The place was designed by Tim Kaine before he left Fallout 2's production, and was basically an homage to the post-apocalyptic novel A Canticle for Leibowitz. It's about a Catholic monastery preserving books and knowledge in a post-World War III wasteland, serving as inspiration for Fallout 1 and the Brotherhood of Steel faction, who, in a similar fashion, preserved stuff from the old worlds except it was weapons and technology. Meanwhile, the Abbey in Fallout 2 would have been a monastery preserving books north of Vault City. It would have been comprised of a bunch of pacifist monks, who allowed anyone to come and read their collection of information. which could help you in completing certain quests in the Wasteland. However, later in the game, their books would be confiscated by the Brotherhood of Steel, and you'd be asked to help in the matter. Why it got cut out, Tim doesn't know, but I'd imagine the 9-month production time didn't help. The village would have been a small town outside of Vault City, which was desperately trying not to be enslaved. Fending off Vault City soldiers with domesticated mole rats, the player would have been able to help them or doom them. The She Submarine would have been a place you had to go in order to deactivate its auto-defense system. It was intended to be another step in the main quest, so you could drive the tanker to the oil rig. And it got axed because even the devs felt Fallout 2 was long enough. According to the Fallout Bible, there was an idea for an Earth Protection Agency which was the site of a pre-war industrial waste management company. Surrounded by a lake of toxic, mutative sludge, it would have become the home of the Doctor, who would experiment on animals and people alike. It's kind of a retread of the Master, so it kind of makes sense that it got reworked. The second draft of this idea was written by Chris Avallone, who renamed it the Environmental Protection Agency, but even this didn't make the final cut. Arguably the biggest location cut out of the game, this would have been a 7-story dungeon filled with all manner of weird science, a jungle floor filled with Venus man-traps, quirky hologram characters, including one that speaks through binary, a talking toaster. While it didn't make it into Fallout 2, you can really see the seeds for what would become Old World Blues in this location. The Fallout Bible also gives us a taste of Fallout 2's early story concept, where an intelligent computer ran a town known as TV Town, with its inhabitants all androids based off shows from the 50s and 60s. Wastelanders were vying for the town's technology, and the player would even go to space in this draft. In the second draft that followed, there was sort of a giant land fortress roaming the wasteland, although there's some contention whether it was supposed to belong to the Master's army or to the Brotherhood of Steel. I lean towards Leonard's statements the most, which claim it was the mobile command center of the Brotherhood, who would be in league with the descendant of Vault 13's Overseer. Area 51 would have been a ruined base filled with scientists, including the talking head for Lynette, who was reused for Vault City. For the next two areas, these can actually still be accessed in the game, but just some quick context first. Each location is split up into different maps, which you can access through the world map. There's hotkeys to immediately jump to the specific map that you want, by pressing the number correlating to the listed area. So for example, with the Den, 1 would send you to the west side, and 2 would send you to the east side. And that would ordinarily be it. But if you press 3, you'll go to a cut map called Den Residential. Despite looking finished and still being accessible in the main game, you can't actually interact all that much with NPCs here. There's even another version of Smitty and his junkyard here. Similarly, another secret area exists in San Francisco, which is the Hubologist space shuttle interior. But this one looks a lot more blatantly unfinished. We'll talk about it more later down the line during its own entry. Lastly, there was the Love Shack, the HQ of the LGBTQ faction, the Rainbow Confederation, that was hostile against straight characters. Honestly, this just sounds like something out of early South Park. Not really Fallout, and fortunately, it got cut. The first Fallout movie refers to the cancelled Fallout film adaptation made by Interplay Films, a films division of Interplay Entertainment. Apparently, there was a partnership with Dark Horse Entertainment to work on the Fallout film, but nothing ever came out of it, and the division was disbanded. However, in 2011, Brent Friedman, a writer best known for the Dark Skies series and Mortal Kombat Annihilation, revealed that he was once commissioned to write up a film treatment for the cancelled Fallout film. More than that, he posted it online. Keep in mind that a film treatment isn't a script. It's just a glorified synopsis of a film. So all we really have is a Cliff Notes version of the movie, but nevertheless, we do get a vivid picture of what could have been.
Mother, you're alive. Too bad you will die.
In short, the film would have been a Hollywood retelling of Fallout 1, with all that implies. For a longer breakdown, we start in Vault 13, where the main character, just called the Hero, is starting to suffer the Vault equivalent of cabin fever. There's an interesting bit about how the Vaults have a fake simulation of pre-war Los Angeles, which helps citizens cope with life forever underground. But it's no longer working on our main character, who has a breakdown. He wants out. Even as the son of the Vault supervisor, and with an arranged marriage on the way, complete with a marriage kit, he yearns for something better. Fortunately, the Hero lucks out, being selected along with 3 others to go outside searching for a water chip to fix the Vault's water purification system. He gets this task from the Vault Elders who run the Vault, comprised of its first-generation survivors, sorta similar to the Brotherhood of Steel's Council of Elders we saw in Fallout 1. The Vault Elders keep the water chip crisis a secret in order to not cause chaos, and tell the Hero that he must return with the chip, or that Vault 13 is toast. So, our party of Vault Dwellers leaves with survival kits as well as money for Radio Shack, only to immediately lose the Hero's friend to a raider group using a phone booth as bait. Notice that instead of raiders, they're called scavengers, and this is the case throughout the whole treatment for some reason. In early game fashion, the party runs away from combat, and then find the ruins of Vault 8, where another water chip is said to be. Only the place was destroyed by super mutants, and the water chip is no good. The Hero sets off an alarm, escapes obstacles, then runs into a character literally referred to as Mad Max. Max captures the characters and goes to kill them. But when he realizes they're Vault Dwellers, Max makes a deal with them. In exchange for letting them live and helping them find a water chip, they'll give him a Garden of Eden creation kit, something the Hero has inspected for his Vault job. The party then heads off to the hub to trade for a water chip, on an ATV I might add, and discover that LA is a jungle due to the use of multiple Geks. Mutants also apparently rule the place like the Mafia. The group run into the raiders from earlier, selling their fallen companion's belongings, and his organs. Fighting ensues. They dispatch the raiders only to be arrested by hub guards and brought to its mayor, Decker. In what's probably my favorite part of the film treatment, Decker's office is the last standing movie theater in town, and he's watching his own favorite scene from the film Blade Runner. He says, now that would have been a fun future. It's not really all that in line with the world of Fallout, but it is a cool concept seeing a character watching media about a different dark future and how their own dark world twists their perception of it. Then Decker makes an offer. 1 water chip in exchange for 2 party members, one being the girl companion. The Hero is put into a tough moral dilemma. Give up his companions, his fellow Vault Dwellers, in exchange for saving the Vault. And this might be the only option he has. Still reluctant, he gets the night to think a decision over in Decker's nightclub, where he meets a historian who's writing a book on World War III. Vault 13 just so happens to be its final chapter, and the Vault Dweller learns something colossal. The Great War wasn't started by China, or any enemy nation for that matter. The creator of the Vaults launched the first nuke to fulfill his own zealous prophecy of nuclear annihilation. And what followed was just a natural chain reaction of mutually assured destruction. Vault-Tec caused the Great War. Meanwhile, Max reveals his tragic backstory, being a boy from Vault 8 who survived the attack with his father and journeyed out to start life anew with a Gek. His dad got killed, and he became a slave to Decker, forced into building the hub before escaping back to Vault 8. All of a sudden, super mutants invade, looking for the Vault Dwellers. One of the Vault companions says he knows a way out, only to betray them to Decker and his men, who are also in league with the mutants. Then, Max betrays the group, putting his gun against the girl's head and demanding a Gek from the mutants, and he shoots Decker for good measure. The mutants strike up a deal with Max to give him a Gek and safe passage to his ATV if he gives up Vault 13, which he does. Max drives off, and the 3 Vault Dwellers are imprisoned. with the traitor companion saying he was just trying to do what was best for the Vault. Yeah, I've heard that one before. He offers to be the first to go with the mutants once they start their experiments, and immediately gives up Vault 13's location in the process. He's dipped into FEV by the Master, who in this adaptation was a survivor of the Great War who couldn't afford Vault entry. So he created the FEV to help people survive the wasteland. He has this cartoon evil plan where he made LA as alluring as possible to capture travelers and experiment upon them to create the perfect master race. His super mutants are sterile, so he hopes by stealing pristine humans from vaults, they'll come out of his experiments as pristine mutants. They'll turn out differently as super mutants compared to the irradiated wasteland survivors. Basically, the Master wants the hero and girl to serve as the Adam and Eve of a pure mutant race of his making. Fortunately, Max has a change of heart after being betrayed by the mutants and getting a dud Gek. He steals some nifty plasma weapons and busts the Vault Dwellers out of captivity, saying this was all part of his plan. Yeah, sure thing. But to be fair, he does give them a water chip that he snagged off the mutants, and they travel back to Vault 13 after a high-speed car chase. Back home, our heroes ask to be let inside, thinking themselves to be the Vault's saviors. Except, the Overseer denies their request. Turns out, Vault 13 had working water chips they could use all along. This decision to send people outside was just about purifying the collective conscious, since, in the Overseer's words, discontent is contagious. Worst disease known to Vault Dwellers. Even with the Vault Elders being upset with this, the heroes are left outside, where the Master and his mutants come to ambush them. Chaos breaks out. The hero's father dies. Many Vault Dwellers perish in the battle that ensues. In probably the dumbest part of the script, the Master recognizes the Overseer as the person who started World War III. And I just can't take it seriously because it just sounds really corny. But humanity triumphs. The Master is slain after a fake-out death where he injects Max with FEV, forcing a reluctant hero to make a true, tough decision. It's a decision that's necessary for him to become a true leader, ready to face the future with a Gek and lead a new generation into the fallout. Arroyo is settled, the hero and girl get busy, and cue happy ending. And that's the Fallout film treatment. I left out a lot of little details, but the full PDF will be in the video description below for anyone who wants to read it through. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of what was on offer here, and even Friedman says there's things he'd change. I guess my biggest gripe is that it doesn't feel like a Fallout film. It has things like the Overseer of Vault 13, the Master, but it just adds needless changes to them that removes nuance instead of adding anything. Like with the decision to have Vault 13's Overseer cause the end of the world. Why? And the Master isn't given any self-reflection. His death scene, one of the best moments in the franchise, with him having this devastating revelation, is changed into a goofy fake-out death. Why? Why not go with his death in the games? Wasn't that more effective? A monster realizing the pain and suffering he's caused, deciding to destroy himself and his work, with the main character literally referred to as Hero and another as Mad Max. The movie reads like it could have been any pulpy, post-apocalyptic action movie. It doesn't come off as Fallout. There's no sense that this is a desolate journey where characters sometimes must do morally dubious things to survive. For example, the main character gets bailed out of making a genuinely tough moral decision getting the water chip, and the one character who does betray his companions for the greater good of the Vault is a generic traitor character who becomes a mutant bad guy. There's nothing about Necropolis or stealing their water chip. There's some weird things like the FEV being treated like a death sentence and Max having to be put down. The ending is happy and ties things together in a nice bow, with setup and payoff about the longing of the fish. Meanwhile, the game ending is bittersweet and makes you reflect about all you've done. whether it was really worth it. It leaves more of an impact, in my opinion. Another note about the film is its twist with Vault-Tec being responsible for causing the Great War. That's the twist in the Fallout show, and there's been some discourse online that perhaps the showrunners borrowed the idea from the movie treatment, and it just stinks. I feel it just answers a question that reduces the message of this franchise, that war is inevitable due to human nature, that it's just part of us collectively to have that potential for destruction. You seriously risk getting away from that idea when it turns out how collectively the nations of humanity kind of have a pass because the singular rich evil corporation actually started the war, that there really is a scapegoat. I don't know, guys. I know some people like the Vault-Tec twist, but I find it really lame. What sucks is, I do think the film had potential. There are things I like here. Little stuff about vault life, where there's simulations of pre-war America that keep people happy, or pre-arranged marriages to keep family trees from getting circular. The game's dark humor's in here. We don't get to see the Brotherhood of Steel for once, and that's solid. They wouldn't have to be the series' marketing material for the upteenth time. Lastly, the idea to retell the first game's story would honestly work, I feel. There is genuine potential and good things about the film treatment, but perhaps it's best it didn't go any further than that.
Too bad you will die.
Caves can appear during random encounters, and though they might seem like a background detail, they are fully explorable. Go inside a cave, and you'll have the chance of encountering anything from geckos to deathclaws, as well as treasure. Fallout New Vegas has a fan-favorite companion named Boone, a former NCR sharpshooter who isn't in Fallout Tactics. However, his voice actor Jason Marsden is part of the Tactics voice cast. He voices two characters in the game, a Raider gang leader named Horace, and a Brotherhood quartermaster named Hassan. The Horace character has spawned a YouTube video called Boone in Fallout Tactics, and while it's not the same character, it's the same voice.
Let's see what you trained monkeys can show little old Horace.
I need someone I can trust. You're a stranger. That's a start.
Mikey Frazier, son of Iguana Bob Frazier, is the owner of Son of Bob's Iguana Bits. This is unlike his father, who served Iguana Bits out of his Prime Choice Select, which he got from a doctor selling him human bodies. Iguana Bits is people. While it doesn't seem Mikey carries on the family tradition of making cannibals out of customers, there's a faction of well-dressed, well-mannered characters that are secretly cannibals in New Vegas, called the White Glove Society. Mikey Frazier was well-dressed and secretive himself. To be honest, I don't think there's any connection here, since there's a 40-year gap between Fallout 2 and New Vegas. But if you're fine with a huge stretch, then sure, Mikey Frazier works for the White Glove Society. Elvis Presley was a titan of the music industry in the 20th century. Called the King of Rock and Roll, or the King for short, his memory lives on through tribute groups, impersonators, and popular media like Fallout. Elvis made his first appearance in the series way back in Fallout 1, as a framed photo next to a crashed UFO. This seems to refer to the conspiracy that Elvis didn't truly die in real life, but was instead abducted by aliens. Either that, or aliens were fans of Elvis the same way Fallout 2's NPCs were. A total of 7 framed photos can be found in the game. And then there's Fallout New Vegas, with an entire faction called the Kings. These guys are a gang of Elvis impersonators who dress up and imitate the man who had an entire school of impersonation dedicated to him.
Near as I can tell, it was some sort of religious institution. Oh, I know it says school out front, but everything in here seems to be related to the worship of some guy from back in the day. People used to come here to learn about him, to dress like him, move like him, to be him. If that's not worship, I don't know what is.
Unfortunately, there's yet to be any Elvis music in the series due to licensing costs. Even New Vegas, which had the Kings, had to steer clear of the Kings' music in order to afford an actual soundtrack. Hopefully, with how big the series has gotten, we might actually get to hear the King of Rock and Roll one day. I'm not entirely sure what this entry refers to, but it could be a reference to some of Ian's comments in the Tell Me About Dialogue feature. For example, while you can ask Ian about locations like Necropolis, you can also ask him about topics such as war and psychics. And you wouldn't know you could do this unless you manually typed that out and asked him. So it's kind of like secret dialogue. The calculator from Fallout Tactics is a better version of Skynet. The calculator is an AI designed to oversee Vault Zero and the entire Vault network across America. Since Vault Zero housed the greatest minds and wallets in the US, it would gather data to determine the best possible course of action for humanity's reconstruction. And when the time was right, it would facilitate protocols for leading the Vault survivors out into a wasteland using a robot army, which would also conveniently kill any mutant life in the way. The calculator was designed to oversee the Vault's and humanity's protection. Even when it was seriously underfunded and ended up short-circuiting, it still carried out that initiative. Only, it followed orders too literally. Any human survivors in the wasteland with radiation exposure and mutant genes were considered mutants to be purged by the calculator. So yeah, not good. But according to this entry, the calculator with all of its flaws is still a better version of Skynet from Fallout 2. It's an AI made for helping scientists with research, including work on cybernetic brains, the same stuff that powers the calculator. This is just another fun little fan theory in the vein of Mikey working for the White Glove Society. Was Skynet some sort of prototype for the calculator, which was the bigger, better vision for this sort of technology? Personally, I don't think so, but still, it's a fun idea. The hairy Deathclaw could mean one of two things. The original concept art for the Deathclaw was that of a hairy mutant that was a mix between a wolverine and a brown bear. Apparently, an unused Tarrasque model from Planescape Torment ended up becoming the basis for the final Deathclaw, and the rest is history. Then you have the hairy Deathclaw that is in Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel. Living in the Midwestern states like Illinois and Kansas, this Deathclaw variant has fur instead of scales, as well as the capacity to speak English, much like the intelligent Deathclaws of Fallout 2. They're able to become allies to the Midwestern chapter of the Brotherhood, serving as strong warriors. The canon of Tactics being the way it is, Schrodinger's retcon fully applies. They exist and simultaneously don't in the Fallout universe. Maybe we'll see them in a future Fallout game, assuming they weren't wiped out like the unholy abominations they are. Ian died in Necropolis. Fallout 2's manual, The Vault Dweller's Memoirs, helped give us a recap of what happened in Fallout 1, while also establishing a canon account of the events that went down. And according to that account, Ian died when the Vault Dweller went to Necropolis, burned to death by a super mutant's flamer. That's pretty brutal, and it's sad to think that canonically, there was no saving your companion. Ian died early into your travels, and then Dogmeat passed as well. Now, in the game, yes, you can save Dogmeat, and the same with Ian. It's hard, but not impossible. According to the memoirs, though, Dogmeat died at Mariposa to a force field's energy, a loyal companion to the end. Creepypasta is a name for internet horror stories and legends which are copy and pasted throughout social media. Copy and paste stories being referred to as copypasta, and with the creepy factor added in, you get creepypasta. There exists a couple of creepypastas for the modern Fallout games. including the Fallout 3 number station prophesizing the end of our own world, and the cut Lone Wolf radio quest in New Vegas, where players could help a depraved radio host kill kidnapped children. Again, these are all just fictional, scary stories. They're meant to creep people out and get them thinking there might be something spooky in their games. The same way a good campfire story might scare someone into thinking there's something in the woods. And while there isn't anything evil lurking in the classic Fallouts, there is a creepypasta about them, called Fallout 2's Toxic Caves. I was originally going to do a quick breakdown of the story, but come on, I'd be missing out on my opportunity to do a creepypasta reading. I grew up on those, so why the heck not? So sit back, get your lucky Vault 13 canteen out, and enjoy. In Fallout 2, after you beat the game, you can continue playing. Remember that defunct vault near the beginning? The one with the toxic sludge on the ground and the elevator where you can kill golden geckos. It's called Toxic Caves on the world map, but it is clearly a very small vault with 3 levels, including the first cave level, where you take a ladder down to the actual vault structure. Well, if you have one of the original pressings of the game and you have not patched it, you can return to the Toxic Caves after the game is over. And if you have the item Heart Pills from the Weston Murder Quest, you can kill yourself in the elevator. After the usual death scene plays, the screen will stay black without the menu screen opening up. After several minutes, you will begin to hear a hollow, echoey white noise cave sort of sound. The screen will slowly fade back in to find your character in a pile of that nasty biomass goo that was all around the master from the first game. Your character will stand up and the usual ambient soundtrack will start playing, but the white noise will still be there. Explore this new level, but do not pick any locks. Those areas are extremely off limits, and the developers put some very nasty programming tricks into the code to protect their secrets. As you continue farther into the level, you will hear the white noise continue to increase in volume, and the ambient soundtrack you are so used to will exhibit strange artifacts. This may be because of the difficulty of playing 2 music tracks simultaneously in the Fallout engine, which wasn't designed to be able to do this. Passing locked door after locked door, you will come upon many of the characters you met earlier in the game. Oddly, you only find characters that died, or that would reasonably be expected to die after you last saw them. Like the official endings, the characters found vary depending on how you played the game. If you were the good guy and tried to solve problems without violence, you will only find a few bad guys and unfortunate victims here. If you slaughtered every town, you will see several hundred characters. Regardless of what you did earlier, none of the characters will speak to you or react to any action in any way. They can't be pickpocketed, killed, pushed aside, or healed. If you try to use first aid, doctor, or any healing items on them, the game will tell you in the text box, it's much too late for that, Chosen. It would appear this area is purgatory, or possibly hell, based on being populated entirely by dead characters. The final character, standing just before the final door, is always a player character model from the first Fallout. This is the only character you can interact with, and as you approach, the white noise reaches a crescendo, and the ambient music abruptly cuts out. If you simply bypass him and open the door, the game will play the end credits once again, only with pictures of Hiroshima and Nagasaki victims in the background. They didn't spell Nagasaki right. I'm gonna leave this in. They didn't spell Nagasaki right. This is an extreme poor taste. Yeah, it is. Come on. This is an extreme poor taste. This is an extreme poor taste, and many have wondered why the creators would be so insensitive. When asked, they deny the sequence exists, and call it a hack that was never in the game at all. After it ends, you're greeted with a typical game over screen and are booted to the desktop. If you talk to the final character, he will explain that he's in fact the Vault Dweller from the original game, your ancestor. He will tell you that he is disappointed in the way you turned out, and he will turn his back on you, and your character will collapse into a pile of bones and a death animation that I've never seen in the game itself. Afterwards, the game will fade to white and lock up the computer, forcing a hard reset. There is a third option. Those locked doors I mentioned earlier, this is one door. It's always random as to which door, but if you get lucky in picking, you can use any heavy explosive to blow it open. Inside, you will find a single footlocker, hold a 10mm pistol with no clip in the picture and no ammo in it. None of your normal 10mm ammo can be used. You can load the gun with the Easter egg found in the basement of New Reno Arms. Fire this into the head of the final character, and the game will cut to an over-the-shoulder video showing a young man playing an unidentified Fallout-like game. Some people claim that this is an early version of either Fallout Tactics or Van Buren, but nothing on the screen seems to fit either of those games. Also, neither of those games had started development at the time of the original pressing of Fallout 2. The video itself is poorly lit, with the apparent intention of being a creepy, but nothing spooky actually happens in the video. The man simply plays the unknown game, and the video slowly fades into your desktop. A cool trick. I'm not really sure how they managed a tragularly translucing screen back then. Another strange trick is that according to many players, the final character always matches the character they most recently played in Fallout 1. Both gender and their apparel at the end of the previous game are represented. At first, this would appear to be a save game hack, much like Psycho Mantis in Metal Gear Solid. But the trick works even if the original Fallout was played on a different computer, without transferring any data to the new PC. It's recommended that you do not turn on any television in your house for several hours after experiencing this extra ending. You will quickly realize that the white noise in the game is identical to the white noise now coming from your television. Cable, satellite, and even antenna, if you still have that, are all somehow incapable of picking up a signal for some time after the secret ending. All internet connections, however, seem to still work. That's how I'm writing this to you now. The funny thing is, I turned my television back off nearly an hour ago, as well as my computer speakers, but I still hear the static getting louder. So, not gonna lie, Classic Fallout Creepypasta did not live up to the hype. This wasn't a good story, but it did have a couple of alright ideas. For example, going off the Metal Gear Solid reference in the story, it seems there was some inspiration taken from the Sorrow boss fight in Metal Gear Solid 3, where players who kill a lot of enemies in a playthrough have a harder time in the fight since they're dealing with all the people they've killed. And in this story, you have the Chosen One dealing with the blood on their hands as well, in a sort of limbo. Maybe a bit of a stretch connecting the two, but I do think that's a solid idea. Same with the game just knowing what your old Fallout 1 character was like, even on different computers. A little out there, yeah, but it could work. It could have been creepy. The story really falls apart when it's made out to be a well-known Easter egg. As if many old-school Fallout players would know that there's a limbo in Fallout 2's first release where you can see your Fallout 1 character and summon the white noise demons. Also, I gotta point out these really weird vocabulary spikes, because it's just kind of funny. I don't believe we know who the original author is, and even though I trashed their writing, I do hope they went on to better things. It's just that no one's gonna lose sleep over Fallout 2's toxic caves. Ghouls were once normal, smooth-skinned humans who, transformed by radiation, became the zombie-looking mutants they are now. But what if you were born a ghoul? I mean, it sounds pretty foul. It's not canon yet, but it almost was. You see, Ghouls in the world of Fallout are sterile, much like the super mutants, and this was also the case in Interplay's cancelled Fallout 3. Ghouls could not reproduce. However, there was a planned ghoul-centered location called the Reservation, which was trying to solve this problem. Led by William Clark, a former nuclear physicist turned ghoul god, efforts to bring about ghoul reproduction were well underway, and aided by the crazed Dr. Sebastian, who was zealous in this mission. He was cruel beyond description, requiring the use of normal human beings to carry out his experiments. Remember, ghouls are sterile in the Fallout universe. Regular humans aren't. So in ad-friendly terms, captured humans were required to bring about born ghouls, with success rates as low as 2%. The other 98% didn't work out. As for the born ghouls themselves, they're stated to be a little bit better looking than the regular ghouls, as well as being stronger and faster than them. Viewed by the reservation ghouls as gods, there's hope that this new generation can reproduce normally. Players with 7 endurance who seduce a born ghoul named Bell wind up proving that's the case, bringing about a Ghoul Jr. I do like the idea of the reservation and the twisted reproduction experiments, which makes it a little disappointing we're probably never going to see something like them. The Fallout franchise is so mainstream now, paired with how people treat uncomfortable ideas, that it'd probably be seen as a risk more than a storytelling opportunity, even if it's shown in the worst possible light. I don't think Bethesda is going to show us born ghouls as they were originally intended. In a sense, as much as the game can allow, the Vault Dweller is whoever we want them to be. The idea being that we decide who this character is. We choose their skills, their attributes, traits. We imagine a background for them. But with that said, some details of the Vault Dweller are set in stone. Notably, the Fallout 2 manual gives us the Vault Dweller's memoirs, his personal writing and account of the events of the first game. They become a definitive character outside of us, with their own writing and memories of their experience. However, there's another, smaller example like this in Fallout 1, where some details of the Vault Dweller get revealed via memories. As the player makes their way to the Master's chamber, they must pass the so-called Corridor of Revulsion. This is where the Master will psionically attack players who don't have a psychic nullifier equipped. Don't have it, you get hallucinations, including one about a forgotten friend of the Vault Dweller, who died. I suppose you could argue this is an implanted memory, but it could just as easily be argued that the Master is genuinely bringing something up from the Vault Dweller's past in order to hurt them. That they did have someone close in their life at one point who died in the vault. How they died is anyone's guess, but I would assume that this was something that happened during the Vault Dweller's childhood, if they were able to easily forget about them. The Vault Dweller buried the memory of their friend once they died, because it was something so traumatic. Remember, death can be a lot for a kid to take in. Then, add in the fact it's another kid like you who dies, a kid who's your friend. Finally, add the fact you're living in a safety shelter, in a culture of protection and perseverance, where you're supposed to be safe. Confronted with something as blunt as death in the circumstance would probably destroy some kids. So, it's no wonder it went into the vault of the Vault Dweller's mind. The Pip-Boy is a series of wearable computers developed by Robco Industries, which served as standard equipment in America's vaults. Like Power Armor or Vault Boy, it's a staple of the series. But what does its name mean? Why call it Pip-Boy exactly? Well, PIP is an acronym for Personal Information Processor, and Boy most likely refers to the boy mascots that appear on the device, Pip-Boy on the old 2000 series and Vault Boy in the newer ones. Also, perhaps the Fallout devs were inspired by portable device naming conventions. For example, take the Sony Walkman or the Nintendo Game Boy. The screaming face texture was another entry that had me stumped, so thank you to Doc Barnarchy for helping me out. This entry most likely refers to a texture that appears in Fallout 1 and 2, which is of Maynard James Keenan, frontman of the band Tool. It's just a random poster you can see on certain walls, as a little tribute to the band and its first album. The team were fans, after all. I think that's the best bet on what this entry means. Alternatively though, maybe it's referencing the screaming faces from the Art Deco buildings, in which case, I couldn't find what the origin of those are. I would assume they were digitally designed, but maybe one of the devs' faces was used as a reference or inspiration. The crunch can do that to you, I'd imagine. Psychers are mutants with psychic powers. We covered them a while back, when I said the Master created these guys. And seemingly, he did. He made a group called Psychers, and they had psychic powers. But here's the thing. According to the Fallout Bible, those guys got wiped out when the cathedral exploded. Yet there's more psychic characters in the world of Fallout long after. So, are these also Psychers? According to some, yes, Psyker could be a catch-all term, and maybe a condition like the ghouls, where incredibly rare circumstances can bring about a mutation, but instead of turning you into an immortal zombie, you're granted psychic powers. As long as their powers aren't too out there, I do like their inclusion in the series, and I do hope to see more of the Psychers in later games. The worst ending of Fallout 1 wasn't included in the game, because the developers were mixed on the whole time limit mechanic. Players have 150 days to find a water chip for Vault 13, and 500 days to stop the Master and his mutant army. Fail to stop them, and they invade Vault 13, giving you the game's worst ending. Originally, Fallout 1 was released with both time limits in the game, but later the devs decided to keep one and axe the worst one. So the worst ending and mutant time limit got removed in a post-launch patch. Necropolis is a city filled with ghouls that appears in Fallout 1, and it's where the Vault Dweller must go to find the water chip. However, that puts players in a really bad spot. They must take the city's water chip, putting the vault before an entire community. It's the easiest route to take, but the most destructive, causing the ghouls to die.
The ghouls of Necropolis learn firsthand the final meaning of dehydration as their city succumbs to the desert sands and the water runs out. Without their water-purifying control chip, they do not survive.
Fortunately though, there is a choice to restore the city's water pump, allowing you to take the chip without dooming anyone. Plus, this is the canon ending to Fallout 1. Necropolis was saved, but unfortunately, it was still doomed. A force of super mutants invaded the city, slaughtering its inhabitants. This is the canon ending.
The mutant attack on Necropolis spares none of its ghoulish inhabitants. After the mutant armies advance, they leave a truly dead city behind them.
The good news is that some of the town apparently survived and fled into the wasteland, rumored to have founded the city of Dayglow. But ultimately, there's just no saving Necropolis. Todd is a liar, but I don't think he hates Fallout. In Fallout 2, getting killed by an Enclave soldier causes you to get one of 3 Enclave endings.
You fought valiantly, but to no avail. The Enclave triumphs, and soon the entire world dies. You have died, along with everyone else on the Earth. The Enclave triumphs, releasing the FEV virus into the atmosphere. Your death has sealed the fate of everyone else on Earth. The Enclave triumphs, releasing the FEV virus into the atmosphere. Millions die, and the Earth falls silent again.
It's really bleak stuff, but there isn't a nightmare-inducing bad ending cutscene to show it like the bad ending in Fallout 1. In Fallout 2, all you get is a typical death screen with a unique message. I do wish we got something in the same vein as Fallout 1's bad ending, or even an option to join the Enclave, but given the game's short production, it's not too surprising we didn't get to see it. Fallout 1 raccoons, or Slanter, were a race of sentient raccoon mutants who were cut out of the game save for a single holodisc reference. The reason they got cut differ person to person. Tim Kaine says he didn't approve of the Slanter since they didn't fit the style or direction of the game. But developer Scott Campbell says they didn't make it in due to the amount of art production that would be required for adding them. Other things needed to be prioritized during development, so the raccoon people got the axe. Either way, the Slanter were created by Brian Fryermuth, a writer and quest designer on Fallout 1. He wrote a whole document for their village along with Scott, and clearly liked the critters, so I'll put aside my mutant bias for a bit and talk about them in depth. Born in the West Tech Research Facility, the Slanter were originally normal raccoons that were then used as lab animals and exposed to the forced evolutionary virus. According to a holotape not cut out of the game, this led to their rapid growth in size, as well as intelligence and manual dexterity. Eventually, they were all terminated, except for 2 peers that escaped captivity. That would be the end of that if you were just going off of Fallout 1. Some mutant raccoons are out in the wasteland, but according to the design document of the Slanter, this escape led to a raccoon exodus across the wasteland, and the foundation of an entire oasis village called the Burrows. Far from the devastation of the bombs, this was a lush environment which had a river running through it, allowing for plants to spring up and the Slanter to thrive. In fact, it was here where the Slanter named themselves the Tribe of the Slanter, meaning kindred in their language. But while they did live together, factionalism would slowly start creeping in. After Slanter explorers were killed by human gunfire, half the settlement decided to build dens and traps to keep themselves safe. These were the den dwellers, keen on living like animals, whereas the top dwellers lived on the surface in buildings and used human tech. Things were fine between the two groups, except in 2130, the Great Winter occurred. It was devastating, and the Slanter had no hope to speak of. Their leader, Minishen, son of the tribe's founder, had to do something to save his people, and out of desperation, he did something that would have lasting consequences upon the tribe. He invented a religion. He preached that the West Tech Research Facility was actually the Glow, a land of merciful living gods that created the tribe and kept them living. And it worked, because only the old, original Slanter knew the true nature of West Tech. Things got to a point where the new generation didn't remember where they came from, or the fact they were raccoons to begin with. They were curious about their origin, and simply put, they were willing to believe. Minishen saved the Slanter and died without telling anyone he made the whole religion up. So naturally, over time, people got more curious and wanted to meet their gods. It was hard trekking out and surviving the wasteland, but eventually, a group of top dwellers did manage to make it to the Glow. One made it back, and this incident resulted in heightened tension between the top dwellers and den dwellers. While the top dwellers believe the account of one of their own, the den dwellers deny it, and war might break out because of it. This is where the player comes in. They'd arrive at the peak of this conflict, receiving a quest to prove the Glow gods aren't real. Bringing back proof would make you allies with the tribe, and even earn you the respect of the den dwellers. There'd also be additional quests, such as a search and rescue mission, saving a kidnapped Slanter from a liberal-hating survivalist. I'm not kidding. With a good reputation in the town, you'd be asked to help open trade lines for the Slanter. The hub is really the only proper option here. Meanwhile, if you tell the cons about the Burrows, they destroy the place. At the end of the day, I think it was the right call not to include the Slanter in the game. I feel their inclusion would have been too jarring, and gotten away from tackling how humanity's doing after the bombs. even with mutants like the super mutants and the ghouls, you're seeing this twisted form of humanity corrupted by mankind's machinations. The Slanter are just kind of people raccoons. Still, it's an interesting read, with clear passion put into the writing and thought into the quest design. It's also interesting to think, what if? How it would have inspired future Fallout games if talking raccoons were featured in the first one. I mean, even without them, talking intelligent animals still became a thing in the series, and certain infamous mods. Yeah, so cutting these abominations was the correct decision, for sure. Jackarin is the unofficial name for the Overseer of Vault 13, the same Overseer who exiles the Vault Dweller who saved their home. The reason I say unofficial name is because he doesn't technically have that name in-game or in the Fallout Bible. It's just something found in the concept art drawn by Leonard, and even Leonard himself didn't call him by this name afterward. But getting back on track, this isn't a goofy theory that Overseer man secretly evil. Genuinely speaking, there's a solid case to be made that the Overseer sent you out into the wasteland to die. And I'm not talking about the banishment either. I'm talking straight from the start. First time leaving the vault and seeing sunlight, you were meant to be cooked. The game was rigged from the start. There's a ton to untangle here, so I'm just going to start with the motivation. The reason the Overseer sends you to die is to preserve the Vault way of life, evil social experiments included. And objectively speaking, this already happens at the end of the game. You're exiled from Vault 13, told you're a hero, but you have to leave, because of what you represent.
Everyone will want to talk to you. Every youngster will look up to you and want to emulate you. And then what? They'll want to leave. What happens to the Vault if we lose the best of a generation? What if we are the only safe place in the world? You just gave us back all these lives. I can't take the chance of losing them. I've made a lot of tough decisions since I took this position, but none of them harder than this one. You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
You're exiled from Vault 13. Told you're a hero, but you have to leave, because of what you represent. The Vault keeps people safe from a dangerous wasteland, but you've proven you can survive it and become a hero in it. It's only natural people would want to follow in your footsteps, do the same thing, leave the Vault behind. So, the Overseer exiles you. It's even stated in the Fallout Bible he wants to keep the social experiment going. He doesn't want you to ruin it, or uncover it for that matter. Now that we know the Overseer is really keen on preserving Vault life, what proof is there that the Overseer would want you gone from the start? Well, consider what Tim Kaine says about low intelligence characters. The reason they might have been chosen to go out and find a water chip is because there might have been an incentive to help the gene pool out. And if you read into that a bit more, the way people were chosen to find a water chip is picking straws. People who included a low intelligence Max Stone, a former thief and granddaughter of a Russian diplomat named Natalia who's interested in the outside world, and a group leader named Albert who wants to leave the Vault and is very charismatic. All characters who in some way, subtly or not, rock the boat, be it with their genetics or their yearnings. Heck, outside of pre-made characters, just look at some of the dialogue choices you get. The Overseer, who wants to preserve normalcy in the Vault, isn't gonna appreciate any of this. So, in the same way a stupid character can get screwed over, how them drawing sticks gets rigged so they get sent out to die, is it that much of a stretch to suggest the Overseer would also send any political dissident to their death? That the Vault Dweller was sent to die? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. The voice casts for the older Fallout games were exceptional. Like, right off the bat in Fallout 1, You got Ron Perlman, Jim Cummings, Keith David, Clancy Brown, and that's just some of the cast. I'm almost surprised they were able to get those names for a first entry in a series, especially a B project. Although it definitely helped that voice director Jamie Thomason was on board the project and not only had the talent he did, but the connections as well. The sequels also had some really phenomenal voice actors, and some who weren't good. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel isn't canon. Gizmo is the owner of Gizmo's Casino in Junktown, and he seems pretty bad. He tries to wipe out his business competitor, Killian Darkwater, who's also the mayor of the town. In general, Gizmo's just really unpleasant and isn't a good guy actually at all. But that being said, there is more to Gizmo than being a fat evil casino man. Originally, he was designed to be good for Junktown. In what was intended to be something of a surprise dark twist, siding with Killian and bringing Gizmo to justice keeps Junktown from living up to its full potential. Meanwhile, siding with Gizmo and killing Killian would have benefited the town, making it safer and its inhabitants richer. According to Fallout programmer Jesse Heinig, the reason it was cut was because marketing decided at the last minute that the game had to, quote, reward good and punish bad. But then again, Tim also has a different explanation for why the endings got cut, citing a lack of telegraphing the consequences to players.
We were worried we led people down the wrong path though, and that, hey, I'm fighting really hard to make this, to do the right thing, and then I'm punished when the game ends. So I'm not sure I'd change that, but I would probably put in more indications that if I were to change it, I'd put in more indications that helping this seemingly bad guy would be a good thing. It was too random. I think that's why it got changed.
Even going off the endings not cut from the game, however, it seems Gizmo's is a slightly better one. Junktown becomes a boomtown, becomes more profitable, and Gizmo dies no matter what. It's a win-win for everyone. Gizmo is really evil, but he would make his town thrive. It makes you take a step back and realize this is the wasteland, and morals just might be a thing of the past. Because whereas one could easily see Gizmo as a greedy murderer, one could also see him as a good guy. Except I don't, so, there's that. The clay figures could be lost in an old Interplay office. There's no proof of this, but we don't know where they are, so it could possibly be the case. Sodor Fallout is a post-apocalyptic fanfiction series about Thomas the Tank Engine, created by Tidmouth Thunderbolt. Sodor being the name of the island Thomas the Train is set in, and Fallout being what happens during the story. There's some kind of explosion thought to be caused by a nuclear meltdown, and forced mutations caused by a chemical injection. It's a Fallout and Chernobyl-inspired Thomas the Tank Engine fanfiction series that seems to have its own little fan following. Junktown is only recycled content. Because, the town's made of junk content that's been recycled into a new purpose. Get it? Well, that, and there are assets reused from the Fallout 1 demo, and certain ideas carried over into Junktown. The scrap heap aesthetic, the conflict between two factions looking to control the town, the dog meat standoff, it's all there in the demo, and it all got reworked into Junktown. The original idea for Fallout 1 was to make it a fantasy game, then was to make a time-traveling adventure with sentient dinosaurs, magical fantasy planets, and a Save the Girl plotline. If that sounds like a weird mishmash of things, that was kind of the point. At the time, the project did have the GURPS license, which allows for playing in any genre, since it's the generic universal role-playing system. So initially, Tim and his team decided to make a universal RPG with anything and everything. Except a producer quickly pointed out they couldn't make something like this, and the idea got scrapped. According to Scott Campbell, the next idea that followed was a successor to Wasteland. Instead of Wasteland 2, it'd be GURPS Wasteland, where the player was a desert ranger sent to Southern California to deal with an uprising. Sadly, Interplay's legal counsel told the devs that EA still retained the rights, so they said screw EA and went about making a spiritual successor instead. With a post-apocalyptic game in mind, next came a story about an alien invasion. The planet was conquered except for one city, where the player lived and had to leave to go beat the aliens. And from here, we see the early inklings of Fallout. A human survivor being from a sanctuary, having to venture outside and defeat a great evil. Scott goes over a couple of more ideas, including a furry apocalypse and a zombie one. But then came the idea of vaults Tim apparently had in a dream. And according to Scott, from this one seed would come an entire game that we know now kickstarted a franchise. Fallout 1 is a bleak game, to the point there's entire videos on this subject. But to keep it short, Fallout 1 is a lot darker compared to the other Fallout games. Those had pop culture references and more wasteland wackiness, whereas this one is played more straight and has a far more brooding atmosphere. I mean, this is a game that starts off with an execution in its intro cutscene. The main quest is saving your vault from dying of dehydration. Then add in elements like the time limit, the originally planned mutant invasions, the Necropolis moral dilemma, plasma guns being horrific killing machines, and that ending. And you start to see what makes Fallout 1 stand out compared to the other games. Sure, there's still humor and lighthearted moments in it, but the first Fallout is a hell of a bleak game. Fallout 2 was censored too. From my research, there's multiple icons in the game that have been replaced. All of them tie into drug use, and what would you know, drugs are a debacle all throughout the Fallout series. In Fallout 3, morphine had to become Med-X to appease the Australians, and in Fallout 2, mentions of drugs became mentions of chems. I also don't know if this is a bug or censorship, but whenever I eat the mutated toe, I don't get the custom message that's supposed to play for it. And it's happened on multiple playthroughs for me. Is this censorship or just a bug? You can be the judge of that. What makes things so odd is that the one thing censored in Fallout 1, not censored in 2, is children. They're in the game, and you can kill them if you want to. But drugs were too much? I just don't understand censorship sometimes. This video link is just a text-to-voice reading of the Fallout 2 Toxic Caves creepypasta, except the title is Fallout 2 Secret Ending.
In Fallout 2, after you beat the game, you can continue playing.
Fallout 2 has two main endings. One is to the main campaign, which is the only one amongst the classic games that lets you keep playing post-ending. And the other one is the 13-year after ending, which just ends the game no matter what. Basically, play Fallout 2 for 13 in-game years, and you'll be greeted with a short cutscene that serves as the end of a playthrough. While the 13-year after ending is basically a big time limit in the game, you don't really have to worry about it. Like, really, you don't. You'll probably finish the game in a year or two if you're slow, and still have a decade to go. Plus, a lot of people don't even know it's a thing compared to the time limit in Fallout 1, so that should say a lot. The San Francisco Secret Place is a cult location accessed by going to San Francisco and pressing the 5 key. This will transport you to an unfinished map that would have been the Hoopologist space shuttle's interior. We know this because interacting with certain tiles gives you a notification that you're seeing a shuttle interior. The Hoopologists are the game's Scientology parody, and have a space shuttle they're planning on going into space with that's doomed no matter what. Lost Fallout 1 and 2 web pages refers to lost media for the original Fallout games. Websites don't last forever if they're not archived, and links can die. That includes links to the original Fallout 1 and 2 websites and pages. Fortunately, we do have the Wayback Machine to see some of that stuff, and alternate search engines like Wibby. But officially speaking, the websites aren't supported anymore, and could be fully lost one day. So let's enjoy him while we can. Ian is a companion in Fallout 1, and he's gotten a bad rap over the years. Namely, for wanting to kill the player. See, companions in Fallout can deal damage to the player by missing shots or accidentally hitting you if you're standing in front of their target. It's annoying, but it's usually just a single bullet you're getting hit with. Not with Ian though. Give Ian the SMG, and he'll almost always use the devastating burst shot firing mode, especially into you. So Ian's something of a joke in the Fallout community. There's just something goofy and memorable about what's supposed to be your loyal companion turning you into mincemeat, and it kinda makes the whole character. Ian's a pretty bland, forgettable companion, except for this one trait that makes him unforgettable. It's kinda like Gandhi in Civilization. No one would remember him if he didn't do something as out of pocket as dropping nukes. Likewise, no one would remember Ian if he didn't do something like killing them. I actually have no idea what Verts is. I mean, there's Verts Fluoro mods. Leave a comment if you have an idea what this is. I lean towards joke entry, but who knows. There is someone who is still developing the game. Except, not quite. I don't think Bethesda is working right now on remastering the old games, and I don't think they're being tinkered on in any official capacity. That being said, modders are still working on them, patching in new features and fixing old bugs. They're still developing these games. Then, to go a bit further with this, there are people working on Fallout-like games, making something reminiscent of the classics, and undoubtedly more projects like this will come, with their own twists and personalities. So while we might not get another Fallout like Fallout anytime soon, we do still have people developing the games. We Need Them is an entry that's pretty ambiguous. If I had to guess, it could mean someone saying that we need the old games. We need them to remind us what was lost. The role-playing, the dark writing, the choices and reactivity to your actions. We need the classic games because, if anything else, they're great RPGs that remind us what we're missing out on. Fallout Tactics 2 is not in development. Even the Iceberg creator said so. Next entry. Full disclaimer. The Iceberg creator said this entry was just a reference to the every Mario 64 copies personalized meme. That being said, on the subject of all Fallout copies being time capsules, I think you could definitely make a case here. If you think about it, the original Fallout game box covers represent a different era of gaming, where creativity and risks could be allowed to pay off. Look at the Fallout 1 manual, for example. Then look at Fallout 4's. It's almost an unfair comparison, and I get why something like this happened. Manufacturing booklets can't be super productive for a $1 million franchise that has copies on PC and different consoles. It probably saved a lot of money just to simplify the manual. But then again, Fallout 1 was a B project, and I'd say the bigger cost here is soul, heart, the love put into the game by its creators, which makes gamers love them too. The classic games had so much soul, to the point the game copy itself and its manual reflect the sheer passion of its designers. Whereas the studio had little faith in the game, Tim and his team did, and they made something that stands the test of time. The Unwashed Village is one of the oldest Fallout communities, and while not literally created by Interplay, it was Interplay's games and forums that helped users meet and go on to create this community. What Interplay did create, however, was the Unwashed Villagers encounter in Fallout 2, which involves a bunch of villagers beating up a spammer named the Grim Reaper. it's a reference to an actual troll that was on the Interplay forums, and it was apparently bad enough that they added him into the game just so he could get killed. I was really surprised to find there wasn't an actual entry on No Mutants Allowed in this iceberg, so I'm doing one myself. No Mutants Allowed is a gaming site dedicated to the Fallout series. Former developers have done interviews or given info before to the site, and genuinely speaking, it's a great resource for the old games, and the series in general. You can find concept art, fan art, and mod files for the classic games here easily. Oh, and speaking of mods, thank you to the Lobby of Hobbies 3244 for the suggestion. Fallout 1.5 is a total conversion mod developed by 4 Fallout fans from the Czech Republic. And simply put, it's my favorite Fallout mod I've played so far. I actually have plans to cover this game in more depth on the channel, just because I think it does so many things well, especially the world building and atmosphere. 1.5 is set in 2170 New Mexico, and the game just does such a great job at sucking you in and making you feel how nasty it is. No joke, this is a disturbing mod that will make you feel bad. It's a genuinely mean, vicious wasteland, where being good is the harder path than being evil. Also, it's telling that Fallout 1 was more of an inspiration for 1.5 than Fallout 2 was. The bleakness of the original game is really doubled down upon here. And if you thought the ending of Fallout 1 was upsetting or the evil choices were cruel, trust me, you're not ready for this mod. But if you can stomach the game's edgier aspects and harder difficulty, you'll be in for a great RPG. Thank you to It's Jicky for the suggestion. What happened to Modoc and the Slags? Modoc is a small Californian town and the origin of the Deathclaw omelet, having a locked up Deathclaw used to make eggs. It was introduced in Fallout 2, where the town was suffering a drought on top of having fears about a nearby ghost farm. A Modoc resident named Carl moved into the place, told them it was haunted by ghosts, and then straight up vanished. When a search party went to the farm looking for him, they found a terrifying sight. The place was littered with bodies on spikes. As it turns out though, the bodies were dummies and Carl just fled to the den. The ghosts weren't actually ghosts either. They were the Slags, descendants of his secret militia with a base underground. Even sheltered from the fallout, they were still mutated by it, given glowing skin and large pupils. So accustomed to living underground, many have developed a fear of falling into the sky, and their fear of outsiders like Carl caused them to scare people away. While players can sit back and let Modoc's fears overwhelm them, causing them to slay the Slags, they can also patch things between the two, allowing them both to flourish.
Relations between the Slags and the residents of Modoc flourished. Between the two peoples, Modoc prospered and became a major farming community, supplying all the outlying regions with food.
This is actually the canon ending and what happened to Modoc and the Slags. We know this because without patching things between the two, every ending is a downer where Modoc dies off. We also have Fallout New Vegas, which makes mention of Modoc's Deathclaw omelets, as well as the town having a Crimson Caravan branch according to a terminal entry. That's basically the last we've heard of Modoc and the Slags. And for now, it's a pretty happy ending. Schizo Elijah was a Fallout YouTuber who loved the classic games in New Vegas. He stated on his YouTube page description that he no longer wanted to make content and wished to pursue God instead. And despite stating he would leave the channel up for archival purposes, it was soon deleted. The only proof I have is a TikTok of all things. I felt like giving him a shout out because he did make some good content, and it does have to do with the older games, as schizoid as it can be. In particular, I thought he had a really solid breakdown of Fallout's economics and the world building around it. At the end of the day though, while I am sad to see him go, I hope he finds happiness. Fallout 1 and 2 are hex-based games. This means that the way characters move around is by moving across a grid on the ground. But this isn't your bog standard square grid. It's a hex-based one. And as a result of the hex design, there's no real way to move up and down smoothly like there is running left and right, which means you're gonna be doing this goofy looking run throughout the games. Fallout Tactics ended up getting rid of the hex grid entirely, as well as adding in proper up and down running. Lastly, Van Buren would have removed the grid too, so players wouldn't have been running around looking like chem addicts. The true purpose of vaults in Fallout is a video on Tim Kane's YouTube channel, Timothy Kane. Here, he reveals the true nature of the vaults being experiments for the creation of a generation starship that would leave our world and colonize another. The ship would need to last a very long time, and entire generations would live and die aboard it before it ever reached its destination. If anything went wrong, goodbye humanity. So the vaults were basically one big sacrifice for the purpose of perfecting the true savior of humanity, a starship. The thing is, it's most likely non-canon, but I still really like Tim's video. In fact, I made a whole series speculating the purpose of each vault in connection to Tim's starship lore, and that's what got me past 10,000 subscribers. So I really do owe a lot to the true purpose video. Thank you to nplacker as well as Dongle620 for the idea. There is sometimes a difference between what's shown in the classic Fallout games and what's shown in the cutscenes. Case in point, the Master desires to turn Vault Dwellers into super mutants, desiring prime normals untainted by radiation. But cue the bad ending where Vault 13 gets invaded, and people are just casually being gunned down, even those fleeing the mutants. Why is that? Well, a case can be made that this is addressed in-game. The Master does say anyone who resists will be killed. Also, with the player squirming no matter how they sided with the Master, even if they joined willingly, an argument can be made that they're getting second thoughts. Can't say I blame them. But this is stuff you can kinda argue around. Then you get to Fallout 2, and things get weird right away. Now, for context, Vault 13 is hidden away in a cave. Fallout 1's cutscenes show this as well, it's hidden away in a cave. The way Vault 13 is introduced in Fallout 2, meanwhile, is that it's a doorway right by the cave entrance. You might think to yourself, well, maybe the Enclave drilled into the mountain to find Vault 13, or something happened. But no, even in-game, Vault 13 is supposed to be hidden away. Why is there this big difference between the cutscene and the game? It's kinda weird, and I don't think much people have mentioned it. It also makes me think back to those cutscenes we were talking about earlier. Should they get the benefit of the doubt? Or was the animation team and the devs on some kind of different page? Thank you to CringeLord3342 for their comment. Did Fallout 2's devs say Frank Horrigan was only killable so that players could beat the game? I don't think so. I found no quotes from devs saying that, and more people seem to think that it's a rumor started on TikTok more than anything else. So I think it's just a fan rumor more than anything. Thank you to the 0835Sibo for their comment. Now, they make the argument that you can play Fallout Tactics as a pacifist, and I get it, but I don't know. Ultimately, Fallout Tactics is a combat game where true pacifism is impossible. And by pacifism, I'm going off the definition that any violence is unjustifiable. It requires you to use your characters to get through combat scenarios. Even if, say, you control one non-fighter character like a medic, inevitably, your other characters must kill people to finish the game. But then I thought for a second, and I kinda had this realization. There hasn't really been a true pacifist run in any of the classic Fallouts. Again, going off the definition for pacifism, that any violence is unjustifiable. Sure, you can play through a lot of Fallout quests as a non-combat character, but not as a truly non-violent character. In Fallout 2, you will have to kill Dick Richardson and defeat Frank Horrigan to beat the game. There's even a bit of foreshadowing about this in the tutorial. In Fallout 1, you don't have to kill anyone, except you do have to destroy Mariposa military base, which would kill the people inside. It might be for the greater good, but it's still resorting to violence, and not really a truly pacifistic course of action. So this notion that the old school Fallouts had pacifist runs might be a little misguided, for the pacifist run is a lie. Fallout 1 was a groundbreaking game. Sure, there were games before it with time limits, character creation, choices and consequences, and even post-apocalyptic settings. For example, Dark Sun Shattered Lands had a ton of these features, and it came out in 1993, 4 years before Fallout. But it was also a combat-centered game. To put it simply, lots of games had features from Fallout at some level, but none of those games were at Fallout's level. I mean, here came an RPG that gave you a choice not to engage in any combat if you didn't want to. That lives up to the RPG spirit of letting you play how you want to play, more than many modern RPGs. Instead of Dungeons and Dragons, you have ruins and mutant deathclaws. Instead of swords and sorcery, you have guns and energy weapons. Instead of black and white moral dilemmas, you have some gray thrown in, and an evil entity out to end humanity who has a nuanced reasoning behind his actions. And instead of pure combat, you can choose to fight, sneak, or talk your way out of a pickle. The legacy of Fallout cannot be understated. The perk system, where you level up and choose an upgrade, was something that Dungeons & Dragons itself incorporated into later editions of the game. The father of RPGs took a lesson out of Fallout's playbook. That says a lot. Then there's the fact that talking down villains or not confronting them at all is something more players want in games. Even Chris Avellone, who decided to include something like it in his own critically acclaimed game. People are looking at Fallout as a case study in RPG design, wanting more ways of playing instead of pure combat, like how an RPG should be. Basically, Fallout 1 was a game that did so much right, it left a serious impact. And I wanted an entry to at least recognize that. The isometric perspective replicates role-playing in real life. Kind of. So role-playing is something that can be done in a number of ways. I use pencils and paper, but some go the extra mile and play with miniatures, or go the extra mile and deserve the green mile like I did. But anywho, that middle one, playing with miniatures. People do roleplay that way, even if I don't. And it's something the Fallout devs probably knew about because they were role players themselves. So in a way, that isometric perspective of the original Fallouts might replicate role-playing a tiny bit. Think about how role-playing in real life with miniatures would go. You wouldn't be looking at them from a top-down perspective, hovering over them like a god, or seeing things from the perspective down below. You'd be looking at them at an angle, like the isometric perspective shows. Then imagine just playing an RPG from there, using miniatures to move around a map, fighting in turn-based combat, using skill rolls to interact with the world. Again, for the record, I don't use miniatures when playing Dungeons & Dragons, so I could have butchered the experience. It's just something to think about. The connection Fallout has with genuine, real-life role-playing, especially when you consider that Fallout is a true RPG. What I mean by this is that the old Fallout games capture some of the same magic of playing a traditional tabletop RPG, translating that experience into a digital format. You'd think more games would want to try to do this, but it seems most RPGs nowadays take after computer RPGs, cannibalizing each other instead of turning to the heart of the genre, like Fallout did. Here's some proof. 1. You create your own character. In an age where a lot of RPGs, even good ones, force you to play as a pre-made character, Fallout 1 and 2 allow you to create your own. You choose their name and stats, you craft a character, and have the freedom to roleplay them in a lot of different ways. Good, bad, charming, stupid. It's up to you, and I find myself loving this character building model more than the ones in other great games because it has more of that RPG spirit to it. It's more in line with what you do playing a tabletop RPG like D&D. You wouldn't want to pick some pre-made character to play as. You'd want to make your own. And Fallout allows that. 2. There are multiple options to handling problems. In the new Fallout games, there's a big emphasis on combat, to the point it's practically unavoidable. But in the old games, remember, if you play your cards right, violence isn't your only option most of the time. You can talk, sneak, or run past your problems if you want to, or you can just go in guns blazing. Quests have multiple ways of finishing them, notably the Rescue Tandy quest line. She gets kidnapped by the cons, and if you want to, you can save her in a ton of ways. You can shoot up the place she's held captive at, sneak in and break her out peacefully, negotiate her release, pay for release, challenge the leader to a fight, or even make a high luck character which will get mistaken for the leader's dead dad, scaring the cons into giving you Tandy. Also, you could always just let them have her or kill her yourself. There's multiple ways of handling the quest, including failing it. That's some real freedom. And while it's not like the game is endless in emergent possibilities the same way actual role-playing can be, it does give enough options that get the brain working, coming up with natural solutions instead of pulling the trigger mindlessly, which reminds me of actual D&D. One of my favorite sessions was the time me and my friends attended this royal dinner. I was a kobold criminal, and the king wanted my head, basically. But I still wanted to attend the dinner, so one of my party members cast True Polymorph on me to change my appearance to a gnome. Except I did make some blunders speaking to the king, and he became very suspicious of my character, to the point he didn't let me excuse myself from the table when the hour was about to approach. My spell was coming to an end, and all of a sudden, everyone at the table is just pitching ideas how to get me the hell out of there. Stuff like letting a rat familiar loose across the table, faking a heart attack, using modify memory on the host. And the choice we ended up going with, or should I say, the choice my buddy Sean ended up going with, interrupting everybody, was to grab a plate and throw it at the royal guard. It didn't work out. But I say all this because that freedom of role-playing is something the older games chased, making it so much more than the average RPG. Also, I bring it up because just like how the royal dinner was a failure, Fallout lets you be one as well. There's consequences to your choices. Do the stupid thing, and you're going to be punished. Insult someone, and they probably won't want to talk to you, or see you breathing for that matter. There are bad endings you can get, and if you go to certain dangerous locations, the enemies won't be downscaled to match your level. They'll eat you alive. Sometimes literally. In an age where I don't think designers want to punish players for making mistakes, Fallout makes you use your head, scaring players into living like a wastelander, getting you immersed into the world. That's role-playing. And finally, Fallout was made by gamers. It was made by people who played the likes of D&D and GURPS, and were then translating that kind of experience into a video game. Fallout started as a GURPS license RPG after all, and even though that license fizzled out, the soul of tabletop gaming didn't. It's what made Fallout what it is, a classic. I think this is why there's such a magic to the classic Fallouts, especially compared to newer Fallouts. I mean, you'll have your RPGs cite Fallout as a big source of inspiration, and that's all well and good, but you might notice something missing. Where's the tabletop inspiration? The OG source of RPGs. That's what inspired the likes of Fallout, and that's what not only made it a real RPG, but a classic. And that's it. Thank you so much for enduring the Classic Fallout Iceberg series. It's been a heck of a ride, but you can actually get off it now. Or not. Stick around, I got a quick update to talk about. I'm working on some more Fallout projects and some non-Fallout projects as well. I do want to make some more Sopranos content, for example, even though HBO seems to be really putting the banhammer on that type of stuff, so it's tough, but you'll see. If you want to help support the channel, please don't forget to drop a like, comment, and subscribe. I know it sounds corny, but it really does make a difference. And also, consider supporting me on Patreon. Right now, it's just $1 to join, and it makes you a champion of the wastes. Instead of being Wasteland Bones, you get to be a Wasteland Champion. If you're not a fan of Patreon, I have other donations in the description, or if you want to help me in another way, you can always give ideas, suggestions, or feedback in the comments below. It really does mean a lot to hear what you guys think of the videos, and see what you want going forward. Thank you guys for watching the series, and all your support so far. I do mean it when I say much more to come. In the meantime, stay safe out there.